Morning sunlight washed over the massive marble pillars of the Welton royal estate, looking absolutely cinematic as always. The entire mansion dripped with generational wealth. The second those golden rays hit the bedroom floors, it was the ultimate alarm clock to kick off another day. Soaking in the chill morning vibes, our main guy was already wide awake, basically just waiting for his cue. Letting out a long, deep breath, he shook off whatever heavy thoughts haunted his sleep and braced himself for reality. Gripping his insanely plush blankets, he finally dragged himself out of bed, mentally preparing for the grind. Things had taken a wild turn lately, and no matter how cozy his velvet slippers felt, he couldn't just ignore the crazy shift in his existence. Meet Jamie Welton. The kid practically rolled the ultimate gotcha, born into an ultra-famous bloodline loaded with cash. We're talking zero struggles and absolute easy mode. As the absolute eldest son of the royal Welton household, he was the #1 heir, meaning the dude literally had the world handed to him on a silver platter. But hold up, his flawless resume had a massive hidden dark side that totally contrasted his shiny rich kid status. Behind the velvet ropes and endless allowance, he actually possessed an insanely overpowered world-ending type of magic. We're talking pure nightmare fuel power. Controlling that kind of absolute chaos required a terrifying level of mental willpower, just to weaponize the fallout without self-destructing. Honestly, even the legendary 12 gods couldn't take him down in a fair fight. Their only desperate play was to seal the Grandmaster away entirely, praying they could put a lid on his god-tier potential. Yeah, that was his brutal past life, but he was just biding his time, absolutely ready to unleash pure karma the second he got an opening, just to prove their little prison was completely useless. He swore on his soul that those deities wouldn't get off with a quick ending. No, he planned to drag them through absolute hell, first a threat that seriously triggered his divine enemies. Diablo Volfir guaranteed that every single terrifying promise he made would cash out, even if he had to suffer through endless torture first. Ultimately, those 12 cowards managed to lock him away. But centuries later, their perfect barrier cracked, giving him the ultimate escape route, right into an epic reincarnation cycle. While his shiny new parents were totally obsessed with their perfect little baby, this tiny toddler was secretly plotting absolute dominance behind those innocent little eyes. The dude was dying to just talk normally and drop the massive lore bomb on the two people he had to call mom and dad. But his tiny infant vocal cords literally couldn't handle the flex. Fast forward, he just embraced the high society life, soaking up all that aggressive parental affection. 9 whole years flew by since then, giving our boy plenty of time to adapt to this massive palace layout, getting swarmed by an army of maids, and having the insane luxury of buying literally anything he pointed at. Still hearing the servants sprinting down the halls just to pamper him always caught him off guard, messing with his head a little bit. Because no matter how heavily this VIP lifestyle slapped, the Dark Lord was used to running wild, thriving on absolute freedom and pure chaos back in his prime. Basically, this fragile 9-year-old body was nothing but a gilded prison. Thank God for his fiercely loyal nanny, who practically acted as his second mom, keeping him sane by literally spoiling him rotten and answering every single tiny request. The second she walked through his bedroom doors, a totally genuine smile broke through his edgy exterior. She playfully asked what he was plotting so early in the morning, and he casually brushed it off, claiming he was just vibing with the sunrise. The nanny immediately gushed, totally hyping up how adorable it was for a kid his age to get emotional over nature, which honestly made the reincarnated demon lord cringe internally at the wholesome praise. But she wasn't just there to chat. She dropped the reminder that his mom was already downstairs waiting for her favorite son. She quickly helped him speedrun his morning outfit, and the duo navigated the massive sprawling hallways, making a beeline for the dining hall. The nanny flashed a massive smile, announcing to the room that the young master had officially entered the chat, kicking off yet another super wholesome family breakfast. Even though Jamie internally dreaded this domestic routine, he played along perfectly because his folks were hardcore dedicated to bonding time. Already chilling at the table were his dad, his mom, and his little sister, and all three literally lit up the second they saw him. Not wanting to ruin the elite family vibes, he swallowed his Dark Lord pride plastered on a cute smile, and gave a sweet good morning to his current squad. The energy was nothing but pure warmth, mostly because, ever since he dropped into this world, they totally worshipped their oldest boy and wanted to hand him the galaxy. His parents just sat back, staring at their kids, with absolute stars in their eyes, utterly obsessed with how aesthetically perfect their genetics turned out. For context, Jamie's mom Sears was the exclusive daughter of the insanely prestigious Bell bloodline, but she ditched the snobby aristocratic attitude to be a totally warm, affectionate mom, and heading up the table was his current dad, Argino Welton. Not only was this guy the head of the legendary royal Welton family, but he also held the elite title of one of the kingdom's 5 swordmasters. But don't let that god-tier status fool you. Behind closed doors, this absolute unit of a warrior was a total simp for his wife and kids, proving family always came first. Then there was Jamie's baby sister Sarah. She was so tiny and overwhelmingly wholesome that literally everyone in the estate would take a bullet for her. Nobody could ever say no to Daddy's little princess. The staff basically tripped over themselves to play along with her games and grant her every tiny wish. Even Jamie had to swallow his pride and act super grateful when she aggressively spoon-fed him totally unprompted. You gotta understand the kid absolutely thrived on this kind of big brother validation. Breaking her heart just wasn't an option. Still playing the perfect sibling drained Jamie's social battery to zero, leaving him desperate for some alone time. But hey, he had an innocent little boy persona to maintain in this ridiculously loving household. Once the dinner circus finally wrapped up, he let out a massive sigh and retreated to his room, his one safe haven to just exist without pretending. He immediately belly-flopped onto the mattress, burying his face in the pillows. Finally, peace. Honestly, witnessing people genuinely care for each other gave him major whiplash. It was the complete opposite of the ruthless bloodbath he called his past life. At least this massive estate came packed with ultimate perks like an epic private library to kill time in. Even though being trapped in a toddler's body without the ability to speak properly had basically pushed him to the edge of insanity. Watching a bizarre little creature flutter his way, he sighed at how exhausting this whole facade was turning out to be. A never-ending act. Still, complaining felt pointless. He hit the ultimate jackpot, a second chance at life, and more importantly, a second chance to fight back. Plus, this reincarnation came with a brand new skill that was about to flip the script entirely. Gripping the weird familiar in his palms, his thoughts darkened. He remembered the 12 gods, the exact deities who condemned him to an agonizing void of nothingness. They sealed him away just because his god-tier potential threatened their fragile egos. He remembered them clinging desperately to their pathetic faith, acting like total parasites feeding off human worship. Sure, his current mana pool was basically a joke right now, but he had all the time in the world to level up. Besides, this current era was completely clueless about the terrifying depths of dark magic. He could absolutely weaponize that ignorance against the arrogant 12 gods who wrote him off as dead. He just needed to grind in the shadows until he was strong enough to unleash absolute hell. Suddenly, his dark plotting got totally derailed by the nanny, who popped in to announce it was story time with Mommy. Jamie instantly realized there was zero way to escape this cringe fest. Refusing was completely off the table, no matter how badly he wanted to skip it. Taking a deep breath, he mentally prepared himself for the performance. In a split second, his dead-eyed stare shifted into the bright, bubbly innocence expected of a sheltered little kid. A tiny part of him genuinely thought being locked back in the eternal void might beat having to act like a giggling toddler every single day. At least in the darkness, he didn't have to fake it. Downstairs, his mom and little sister were already waiting on the couch, totally hyped for some quality bonding time, because shockingly, this family actually liked each other. Meanwhile, Jamie was violently fighting his inner Demon King urges, yet he dropped to his knees in front of his mom, flashing a megawatt smile. "What are we reading today?" he chimed, radiating pure, unadulterated sunshine. The sheer cuteness overload literally made both girls on the sofa freeze in pure awe. Unable to handle the wholesome vibes, they instantly lunged forward, crushing him in a massive group hug, squealing about how much they loved their precious boy. Catching her breath, his mom revealed today's pick, a legendary tale called The Great Magician Heinz. She hyped up the title, asking if they were excited. Without missing a beat, she launched right into the storytime performance. But the hype died down insanely fast. Within minutes, Sarah was already nodding off completely, losing the plot. The fairy tale wrapped up with your standard cliché, happily ever after. Snapping the cover shut, she looked down eagerly, waiting for their review. Sears beamed genuinely, hoping the magical bedtime story had blown their tiny minds. Playing his part flawlessly, Jamie flashed his brightest smile and declared he wanted to grow up to be just as overpowered as that wizard. Melting on the spot, his mom patted his head, swearing her genius little boy could easily reach that level of greatness. She bragged about how he'd already managed to crush the spirits of 3 separate magic tutors. To Jamie, though, that wasn't exactly a flex. Those basic instructors they hired were total amateurs. Breaking them was literally just child's play for a former grandmaster. Hyping him up further, she dropped a bomb his dad had pulled some major strings to hire the absolute strongest mage available. Knowing his father's crazy VIP connections, he definitely wasn't bluffing. This new guy was probably the real deal. Pushing himself off the floor, Jamie made a break for the door. She quickly asked if he was heading back to his favorite spot, the library. He gave a quick nod, and she instantly hit him with the classic mom lecture to go touch some grass instead of burying himself in dusty old books. That definitely didn't speed up his escape plan, though. She pulled him in for yet another suffocating bear hug, absolutely refusing to let her precious boy out of her sight. To dodge any major fallout, Jamie pulls a 200 IQ move and hits her with a preemptive hug just to keep the vibes immaculate. Total stealth mode, she doesn't suspect a thing. Sears is basically ready to beg him to stay and chill, completely melting over how sweet her little boy is acting. But let's be real, he's just plotting his escape route, praying she backs off so he can score some alone time. Mission accomplished. He slips away from his smothering mom and completely ghosts everyone, locking himself in the library to vibe with a heavy-duty magic tome. Snap, the cover slams shut. He just speed ran the entire thing, flexing a massive brain pan that completely shatters the illusion of him being a normal 9-year-old. He cracked this book open, hoping for some high-tier mana hacks, but honestly, it was a total nothing burger. Zero new intel, just pure disappointment. Snapping back to reality, his stomach drops. It's already lunchtime. And no matter how exhausted he is from doing the whole family meal routine, 3 times a day he has to keep up the act. But as he slides up to the dining hall, he gets completely hit with a plot twist. An absolute random just spawned in. The dude is scoping out the hallway, nodding at how the Welton family casually drops ultra-rare artifacts as hallway decor, just to flex their insane net worth. Jamie zeroes in on this guy, eyes totally locked, trying to scan this absolute stranger trespassing in his territory. But then it hits him a suffocating heavy aura. Insane levels of mana are literally radiating off this gray-haired boomer, spiraling around him like a raging typhoon. We're talking absolute top tier, at least a level 7 Grand Mage. Which begs the question, how did he bypass security? Teleportation seems like the only logical cheat code here. Alarm bells ring, is this a high-stakes heist? But brushing that off, the guy is just too ridiculously chill to be a thief. The old man's piercing gaze locks onto Jamie, dissecting every micro-expression, while the kid squares up, trying to read the room. Finally, Jamie channels his inner boss, barking out a demand to know exactly who this intruder thinks he is. And the second he speaks, the air in the room goes ice cold. Jamie's mana flares up with pure killing intent, making the old mage smirk, instantly recognizing that the apple totally didn't fall far from the terrifying Welton tree. Our guy knows. Protocol says he should bow down, but nope, he just glares back, practically choking on the sheer audacity and crushing pressure of this boomer's stare. Being treated like a lab rat, absolutely triggering. He is itching to drop a nuke of a spell just to prove he's built different. The gray-haired wizard takes mental notes. The crazy rumors about this kid's specs are totally legit. He is hyped, baffled by how a literal 9-year-old is packing this kind of heat. And the kid's absolute zero-fear attitude just fuels the fire. He wants to push the limits to see what happens when an unstoppable force meets a tiny, overpowered object. But this blatant disrespect makes Jamie snap. The sheer nerve of some random NPC trying to check his stats, totally unforgivable. He taps back into his original self, the legendary Diablo Volfir, the ultimate menace who literally wiped the floor with pantheons of gods in his past life. So yeah, this geezer just signed his own death warrant. In a split second, Jamie weaponizes his mana, blasting a shockwave straight at the guy, to hit him with a brutal reality check. The old mage doesn't even blink. He just stands there, keeping that annoying, calculating stare, locked dead onto the Welton prodigy. But then the atmosphere shifts. The old man's smirk gets instantly wiped off his face, his eyes going wide as he realizes he vastly underestimated the absolute monster standing in front of him. Meanwhile, Jamie is throwing off massive aura, visibly salty, that his power move didn't instantly vaporize the guy. He's seething. The sharp-eyed elder chuckles, his expression shifting to pure awe. Because honestly, it's mind-blowing that a literal 9-year-old is casually wielding this kind of apocalyptic power. He drops some major props, hyping up the kid's lightning-fast reflexes before announcing it's his turn to deal some damage and flip the script. Jamie is low-key thrilled. The old man is a master of his craft, and the thrill of a real fight gets Jamie's blood pumping. But hold up, something's off. The way the elder weaves the magic formula, completely bizarre for a head-to-head clash. Jamie's kinetic vision kicks in, catching that the strike is a total dud, missing him by a mile. Why even bother dodging? This absolute Giga Chad move leaves the old mage totally stunned. He can't process how the kid didn't even flinch. Standing there like a brick wall, utterly unfazed by a high-tier spell, suddenly a massive shadow drops between them. Jamie's dad spawns in, aggressively shutting down this chaotic sparring match in the middle of his hallway. His voice drops an octave, shooting a lethal glare that warns the elder he just crossed a massive red line. Furious that some hotshot guest would try to jump his underage son like a total amateur, the Count instantly pivots, dropping to one knee, frantic as he checks Jamie for injuries, going full protective dad mode after that insane magical crossfire. Cue the Oscar-winning performance. Jamie remembers his disguise and hits the panic button, turning on the waterworks like a normal 9-year-old, sobbing and stuttering out fake reassurances that he's totally fine. Seeing those tears, that's the final straw. His dad absolutely loses it, forcefully dragging Marquis Linmel away for a very hostile chat, while Jamie smirks internally, realizing that without his dad stepping in, the kid didn't even flinch, straight up flexing his absolute zero fear. Instead of getting mad, the silver-haired dude just cracked up, totally caught off guard by the sheer disrespect of this hilarious standoff. Catching his breath, he admitted he was low-key jealous of the Count. Why? Because this boy was packing some insanely overpowered potential, just waiting to be unleashed. to shake the very foundations of their world. But the Count, yeah, he wasn't vibing with this hype at all. He was still fuming, totally failing to see the logic behind launching a literal magic attack at a toddler. Fast forward a couple of minutes, the trio relocated to a plush lounge to hash out this utter madness, with Argino absolutely demanding answers. Voice dripping with venom, he roared that this was his flesh and blood, the future lord of the Welton house, making that unhinged stunt a massive red flag. But even with a furious dad breathing down his neck, the old mage stayed ice cold, acting like this was just another Tuesday. That arrogant chill only threw gasoline on the fire, triggering the Count's explosive aura that could easily make a veteran spellcaster wet their pants, proving why he was a top-tier swordmaster. Unbothered, Marcus leaned in, smirking, and asked how much the Count actually knew about his own kid, because honestly, missing this kind of talent was practically a crime. Argino just blinked, completely thrown off guard by this curveball question. The old man deadpanned that he wasn't capping at all. The Welton heir was a certified prodigy. He needed the absolute best grindstone to sharpen those wild skills. Letting out a heavy, stressed-out sigh, Argino snapped back that this was exactly why he hired a living legend in the first place, only for said legend to randomly ambush his boy and put his life on the line. Reading the room, Marcus realized the dad was genuinely clueless about what just went down. He decided to just slide past the Count's raging rant, leaving the poor guy completely in the dark. Keep in mind, this guest was the undisputed strongest 8th-class sorcerer alive, meaning whatever dropped out of his mouth was basically gospel truth. Hearing this, self-doubt started creeping into the father's mind. Did he hype up his boy too much? After all, it took an absolute unit of a wizard, like the guy sitting across from him, to actually gauge the kid's true stats. But right now, the legendary old man was talking in pure riddles, leaving Argino scrambling to piece together the puzzle, so he could make his next move. Dropping the ultimate bomb, Marcus flat-out rejected, taking the boy as a disciple, admitting he simply wasn't qualified to handle him. Argino's jaw metaphorically hit the floor. If the absolute goat of magic couldn't do it, who the heck could? Marcus went on to reveal that little Jamie, despite being practically a toddler with zero field experience, had flawlessly predicted every single micro-movement of his spell. The Count's brain basically short-circuited trying to process this. That kind of battle IQ was physically impossible, no matter how big-brained his kid was. Marcus pointed out that the boy instantly calculated the strike zone of the magic, realizing it wouldn't connect, so he didn't even bother dodging. He was just that insanely cocky. The wildest part, not a single muscle twitched. His confidence was absolute. The Archmage declared that with just solo grinding, Jamie could easily hit Tier 3. In fact, if you ignored the whole weak kid body debuff, his actual raw skill was easily pushing past Tier 4. Calling him a prodigy was an insult. The kid was an absolute monster, who completely eclipsed veteran mages while still drinking juice boxes. He absolutely did not need someone holding his hand. Marcus begged the Count to just back him up with resources. Traditional schooling was useless for a mutant, who was practically guaranteed to hit the mythical 9th class. Left alone with his thoughts, Argino was spiraling. He never imagined his heir was packing this level of god-tier talent, completely shattering the ceiling of his expectations. He white-knuckled his fists, desperately trying to keep his poker face intact, while the old man hyped up his boy to the moon. Hearing that Jamie was destined for 9th-class godhood sent shivers down his spine, forcing him to completely rewrite his entire parenting playbook. Respecting the heavy silence, Marcus backed off, letting the father stew in his thoughts. He pushed off the velvet sofa, dropping one last apology for the sudden magical drive-by. Before leaving, he casually dropped that the magical world was standing on the edge of a massive revolution, one that wouldn't just shake up the wizarding circles, but flip the entire globe upside down as long as this kid's spark wasn't snuffed out. Argino stayed glued to his seat, brain stuck on overdrive. The idea that his tiny son was hoarding enough latent power to completely eclipse an 8th-rank legend was mind-boggling. Now he had to thread the needle how to nurture this wild OP trait without robbing his boy of a normal childhood, especially since the kid probably didn't even realize how busted he was. It was a brutal dilemma. Argino was a family man first, fiercely protective of his son's innocence, yet knowing one wrong move could derail a destiny that would change history forever. Outside the window, the sky had already bruised into a deep purple. The moon peeked through the fog, signaling it was time to wrap up this chaotic day. Retreating to his master bedroom, the Count finally let his guard down, dropping the stoic lord persona to just breathe. Jamie was totally wiped out. Honestly, dealing with his mom's absolute meltdown after she caught wind of the gray-haired wizard's stunt was draining. She was in full mama bear mode, completely terrified for her kid's safety. She swore up and down this would never happen again, vowing to make that old geezer pay for pulling such a shady move. At first glance, the whole day felt like a massive waste of time. But honestly, this bizarre day actually handed him a massive win. Getting hit by that geezer's spell was a disguised blessing. His brain essentially recorded the whole thing. Breaking down the mana structure, the flawless technique, and the sheer balance of it all, Jamie realized this mysterious dude was built entirely different. Getting pressed like that was exactly the reality check he needed to keep his own overpowered skills sharp. But the biggest plot twist, his own dad. Count Welton moved with such lethal precision, it practically left Jamie speechless. He always knew his pops was a beast, but witnessing that god-tier swordsmanship firsthand hit different, proving the man was an absolute menace. Just as Jamie was hyping up his dad in his head boom, that exact same gray-haired wizard materialized right behind him. "What's got you smiling like that?" the old man whispered, sending Jamie's soul straight out of his body. The kid totally froze. The wizard had completely masked his mana, erasing his presence so perfectly that Jamie's radar didn't even beep. Marcus just smirked, roasting the kid for being so lost in the sauce that he didn't even notice the morning's trespasser chilling right on his mattress. Once the shock wore off, Jamie's anxiety spiked into pure frustration. His brain short-circuited, trying to process how this old man bypassed all the security. Honestly, Marcus had successfully rattled him. Jamie sat there sweating bullets, furiously calculating an escape route while wondering what this creep wanted in his room. Marcus cracked up, totally amused by how easily the kid jumped. The old wizard completely forgot he was technically bullying a literal 9-year-old. Jamie brushed off the disrespect, his mind racing to figure out how the heck this guy bypassed the manor's wards, and what his endgame was. Casually, the geezer dropped that he simply teleported in. That detail alone screamed Grand Mage, since spatial magic was locked behind an insanely high skill ceiling. Marcus leaned in, teasing Jamie for acting like a perfect little angel when his dad was in the room. But the second they were alone, the kid dropped the act, completely shedding that innocent 9-year-old facade. Defensively, Jamie snapped back that dealing with family versus some random stalker required two totally different personas. That just made Marcus laugh harder. The old man wiped a tear, sighing that he was too tired to keep messing with a child. Jamie was just glaring at him, utterly confused by this chaotic energy. Why was this insanely overpowered stranger staring at him like a proud grandpa, instead of dropping any actual lore to clear things up? Marcus casually tossed a thick, ancient-looking grimoire onto the bed, mentioning it would be a massive game-changer for his future. Jamie immediately got suspicious. Why hand over top-tier loot to a random kid? But Marcus totally dodged the question. Instead, he hit Jamie with a brutal reality check. The magic the kid flexed earlier was basically ancient history. He needed a serious software update with modern spells. Jamie's face twisted into pure offense, calling his legendary magic outdated was wild disrespect. But Marcus totally misread the glare as awe over the legendary item. The wizard bragged that the book was packed with his own custom, overpowered spells, and Jamie was getting exclusive early access to it. Okay, now the kid was officially hooked. He desperately needed to analyze the power gap between his ancient spells and whatever this modern grandmaster was cooking up. Jamie wasn't stupid. If he wanted to survive this era, adapting to the current meta was absolutely non-negotiable. His long sleep had left him way behind the curve. Suddenly, the chaotic energy vanished and Marcus locked eyes with him. The old man's aura shifted into something intense, stating he was betting big on the kid standing before him. Jamie just stared back, sweating slightly. Marcus challenged him, saying he couldn't wait to see how overpowered the boy would become before they crossed paths again. And just like that, poof, he vanished without leaving a single trace of mana. Jamie let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. That dude was a walking natural disaster. Curiosity taking over, Jamie finally cracked open the heavy cover of the grimoire. The very first page hit him with a heavy truth. All the mana flowing through this world must channel directly through the caster, ultimately anchoring itself deep within their heart. Sure, this was the absolute best way to master mana control, but it came with one massive catch. The human body could only channel so much raw energy at once. Plus, according to the master, his current spellbook was straight-up ancient history. He had to crack the code on Marcus's modern magic. Hyped out of his mind, he inhaled every single page, completely locked in. He soaked up the knowledge like a sponge. But reality hit hard. This stuff wasn't just fascinating, it was insanely complicated. To make it work, he literally had to feel every microscopic particle of mana seeping into his pores and flooding his veins. Pulling off a technique this intense required some next-level focus and a flawless mind-body connection. He flopped face first onto his mattress, wondering what kind of freak could actually pull this off. Honestly, the old-school methods were way smoother, totally practical, and didn't come with these ridiculous side effects. But then, his massive ego kicked in. Hello, he was the one and only Diablo Valfir. Quitting just wasn't in his DNA. He bounced right back up, gears turning as he mapped out a brilliant strategy to conquer this new challenge. Seconds later, he was staring down the exact same textbook he'd rage quit just moments prior. A light bulb went off. This guide was a total game changer, and he silently sent a thank you to the old wizard. He swore right then and there to devour every single word, weaponizing this newfound knowledge to min-max his own stats. But to kick things off, he desperately needed a hyper-reliable assistant. With a flick of his wrist, Jamie summoned Pip, a hovering eyeball familiar that always teleported exactly where he needed it. Honestly, even Jamie was low-key stunned by how fast the little guy spawned in on command. "Hit me with some mana," Jamie ordered, and the familiar happily geared up to assist his boss. The shadowy creature locked in, visibly flexing as it hyper-focused on executing the command perfectly. Its eye snapped wide open, unleashing a burst of pure, raw energy, the exact ingredient Jamie needed to start cooking. Right off the bat, he hit the first major roadblock. His physical body hit a hard cap on how much mana it could absorb. To nail the textbook technique, you needed painfully exact measurements, something almost impossible to micromanage manually. But Jamie had a major cheat code. Black acted as a perfect automatic filter, saving him from total mental and physical burnout. Thanks to their soul contract, the familiar could slice the energy output into the exact microdoses required. Problem solved. Black was the ultimate hack for mastering this next-generation magic system, and Jamie had to speedrun this whole process just to keep up with the current era's elite prodigies. With the first hurdle cleared, the second issue didn't seem nearly as intimidating. He just had to work around the fragile stats of his current 9-year-old vessel. The fix, simply spreading the energy load evenly across his entire nervous system. Boom. Flawless. He kept grinding these magic experiments all night long, the hours vanishing in a blur. He stayed busy optimizing his new buffs, but since it had been literally hours, with zero noise from his bedroom, his nanny and dad finally posted up at his door, totally weirded out by his radio silence. They cracked the door open and just froze, completely paralyzed by what they saw. The nanny was utterly clueless about what was happening. His dad, though, recognized the vibe instantly. Yet even he was shook to find his kid deep in a hardcore meditation trance right at dawn. The Count literally couldn't blink. The magical aura radiating off his boy was absolutely hypnotic, pulsing with a flawless natural rhythm. The nobleman just watched in pure awe. Realizing Marcus's parting gift had forcefully leveled up Jamie's mana pool practically overnight, he never could have guessed his innocent 9-year-old was packing this kind of god-tier magical talent. Blown away, the boss of the house immediately banned anyone from interrupting Jamie's grind session today. He stationed a few maids right outside as a VIP support squad, just in case the kid woke up and needed anything. Meanwhile, the poor nanny was stressing out of her mind, desperately trying to compute what was going on with her young master. The Count's brain went into overdrive. If Jamie ditched the sword to become an elite spellcaster, it completely changed the game. It flipped the entire script on their family's future, easily dwarfing the magical bloodline he inherited from his mother's side. This level of genius shattered every expectation, making his maternal relatives look like absolute amateurs in comparison. The Count was hyped. Jamie could legitimately hit the legendary Tier 9, a realm of godlike power Marcus had predicted, while the kid himself was just chilling in his room leveling up. Golden hour sunlight flooded the massive estate, but our boy was locked in. He was grinding away, trying to crack the code of his own core magic. Total tunnel vision. He dove deep into his spiritual center, desperate to figure out the mechanics behind this brand new power system. Well, new to this body, but it was the exact same system he used back in his past life. Snap. His eyes shot open, breaking him out of that intense flow state. He had been in the zone for hours. Reading his own energy like an open book, a smirk crossed his face. He totally nailed it. Splitting raw mana into microscopic particles is usually a chaotic, explosive mess, which definitely threw him off at first. But after just a handful of tries, it clicked like pieces of a puzzle. Still, he hit a hard wall at the 4th tier of mana. For a guy with his god-tier ambition, that was nowhere near enough. To be fair though, he literally picked up this mana control technique a few hours ago. Hitting tier 4 that fast is straight up terrifying. He was practically knocking on the door of the 5th tier, but he had to face facts. This kid's body was way too fragile to handle that kind of heat. Pushing it any further would literally fry his physical limits, so calling a timeout was the only play. Sitting nearby, his absolute unit of a shadow pet was watching like a hawk. The creature subtly checked his vibes, trying to mentally tell his boss to chill out. A quick telepathic chat later, Jamie threw in the towel. Wrecking his own body for a quick power-up just wasn't the move. Plus, the literal gods he planned on destroying weren't going anywhere anytime soon. With that sorted, he cloaked his familiar in a heavy layer of invisibility. To dodge all the annoying questions from the servants. It was time to step out of the lab and go check on his dad. Masking the beast's energy was crucial. If his old man caught wind of a dark entity living in the manor, it would be game over. Black caught the drift in seconds. He instantly sucked up all the heavy mana residue his master had been leaking during the training montage. It was a flawless sync. Being bound as a familiar meant their teamwork was entirely telepathic and seamless. His dad wouldn't suspect a thing. Once the room was completely scrubbed of any magical fingerprints, the coast was finally clear. Jamie headed for the door, but let's be real. Even with zero effort, the guy just naturally oozed a crazy heavy aura. His base stats were simply too massive to mask completely. Cut to the Count's office. The territory boss was booked and busy dealing with a very pushy new arrival, demanding an audience. Even with the Count's packed calendar, this guy slipped in. The visitor smoothly mentioned how the heist territory was basically a dead zone for religion, and then he dropped a massive thank you for letting the Zenith Church finally set up shop on their turf. Count Argento played it cool, stating he only greenlit the project because faith usually keeps the locals happy and productive. A simple business transaction, right? But the church rep looked confused by this totally clinical answer. The guy started sweating, wondering if the Count was hiding some secret off-the-books terms they never negotiated. Argento leaned back, his tone freezing over. He made it crystal clear that every move he makes is strictly to benefit his land. And since these holy men were stepping onto his property, they better remember exactly who runs the show around here. The atmosphere instantly shifted. The polite chat was actually a heavy-handed threat dressed up as a welcome, basically telling them, "Do not treat my people like mindless cultists." It was a massive flex showing the church that Argento was not a guy you mess with. The Count kept an iron grip on the vibe, wrapping up the quick power play conversation. He practically pointed at the door telling the guests to beat it if they had so much holy work to do. Tossing out a fake wish for safe travels, they traded awkward goodbyes beneath the so-called blessing of Zenith. The tension in the room could cut glass. Through it all, Argento kept his poker face absolutely flawless, wearing this polite, icy smile right up until the heavy oak doors finally clicked shut. The second he was alone, the smile vanished. His eyes darkened into a heavy, stressed-out glare. He knew letting these fanatics into his territory could blow up in his face big time. But here's the kicker. His oldest son heard every single word. Jamie had been ghosting outside the office the whole time, soaking up the top-secret intel without making a sound. Peeking around the corner, his face twisted. His worst nightmare was literally unfolding in real time. He tried to convince himself he was paranoid, but nope. Right there, stitched on the guest's robes, was that cursed crescent moon and yellow sphere. Worse, he could physically feel the suffocating, disgusting divine pressure rolling off that old priest. Pure, unhinged rage spiked through his veins. How dare the Church of Zenith step foot inside his actual home? It completely shattered his calm. His brain was spinning. Why on earth would his hardcore dad invite these cultists to preach here? His father had never bowed to outside groups before. Staring down the hallway, Jamie made a silent vow he was going to burn this plan to the ground, because there was zero chance he'd let the cult of Zenith take root in his backyard. He locked down his home turf, but his stash of resources was running dangerously dry. To get this new religion greenlit across the territory, he had to completely flip the Count's stubborn mindset. The blueprint was simple: corner his dad for a chat, now then launch a covert midnight investigation later, sourcing bulletproof evidence to shatter his old man's anti-religion stance. Stepping into the Welton Estate's grand parlor, the air felt strictly corporate, a heavy vibe since his dad usually booked this space for high-stakes VIP meetings. Argento was fighting demons, masking a crushing wave of stress from dropping back-to-back brutal decisions recently. Masking the tension, he casually asked if his son had any free time. Flashing a blinding smile, Jamie eagerly nodded, playing it incredibly safe. He had zero clue how much the Count actually knew, especially since today's vibe felt entirely off-script, and it was painfully obvious his father was pulling strings behind the scenes. The Count layered on the warmth, casually dropping a remark about Jamie's hardcore obsession with magic. Our boy didn't even flinch or deny it, since his magical aura was practically screaming the truth. But this chess match was hitting a wall. Raw anxiety bled through. The patriarch's carefully crafted poker face, forcing Jamie to scrutinize him. Still, the kid refused to blow his cover, or hint that he was onto his dad's secrets. Instead, he tilted his head, radiating pure 9-year-old innocence as he asked if everything was okay, fully expecting a generic brush-off instead of a deep emotional dump. But out of nowhere, the Count shattered the silence, spilling his darkest, most immediate fears. He confessed he originally thought his boy would just grow up totally average, a painfully vulnerable fate in their world, but reality just hit him like a truck. His kid was packing god-tier abilities that completely nuked any chance of living a quiet, normal life. It was an absolute double-edged sword. Walking the path of a prodigy is pure hell because standing out from the crowd morphs into a suffocating weight. You can't pawn it off, and you definitely can't erase it from your DNA. You just have to swallow the isolation. Sure, right now flashing that kind of talent just farms hype and awe, but the second he hit adulthood, those same cheering crowds would mercilessly scheme to rip him apart. A massive red flag for Jamie's survival. Argento's knuckles turned white, gripping his armrest, fighting a war against his own panic, desperate not to accidentally traumatize his kid, or send him spiraling into nightmare scenarios, or permanently ruin the beauty of magic for him. Taking a breath, he offered an escape hatch, walk away from the spells whenever he wanted. But the second he chose to grind, his father would back him endlessly. Surprisingly, the kid barely blinked, completely unfazed by the dark side of power haunting his dad. With zero hesitation, Jamie declared he was never dropping magic, claiming it meant the absolute world to him. That raw, fiery passion genuinely sparked joy in the Count's eyes, dreaming of watching his boy max out his stats without derailing his entire future. But in the background, a chilling realization hit him, the aura violently leaking off. Jamie was physically impossible for a 9-year-old. It turned a slightly weird moment into something totally alien. The Count could literally feel his son's raw energy radiating through the room, watching in sheer terror as the boy effortlessly vacuumed up even more power. This completely shattered his expectations. The most terrifying part, the sheer force was bleeding from every single pore of his body. Basic magic theory dictated that mana strictly pools in the heart, yet his son was actively rewriting the laws of physics. Seeking answers, he brought up the grimoire, gifted by Marquis Linmel just last night, probing to see if Jamie had cracked its secrets. Dropping an absolute bomb, Jamie beamed with chaotic energy, proudly announcing he didn't just speed-read the entire relic and memorize the core concepts, he actually debugged the trash formulas holding back the spell's true firepower. His dad mentally blue-screened. His jaw practically hit the floor, completely paralyzed by the insane leveling speed. Achieved solo overnight from a single textbook. A suffocating dead air hung between them. Jamie vibrated with excitement, ready to info-dump everything he had just cracked. But the Count was actively glitching out. His brain simply couldn't process that massive data dump without completely short-circuiting. Doing the mental math, Argento realized he was staring at a living myth. His kid was genuinely locked in to become a legendary 9th-class sorcerer, a reality too insane to fully comprehend. But the gut punch, staring at this 9-year-old monster, the Count instantly felt like an absolute scrub. His own life's work looked like a joke compared to what average mages could even dream of wielding. Sensing the shift, Jamie instantly flipped the switch, playing the clueless kid who couldn't figure out why his dad was having a total meltdown of pure awe. Realizing he might have flexed a little too hard, he quickly dialed back his act. He dropped the ultimate dad praise, raving about how insanely proud he was of today's mind-blowing progress. A massive, glowing smile instantly lit up the kid's face. Let's be real, what child wouldn't completely melt hearing their dad call them a literal prodigy, giving the boy's hair an affectionate ruffle? The old man pushed himself up and stepped out, needing some quiet time to process everything and piece the puzzle together. Cut to Jamie, who was practically counting down the seconds until they'd finally get out of his face. He was completely done acting like some naive kid blushing over a basic compliment. Deep down, he fully clocked the real reason they were hyping him up. But plot twist, Argino's eyes locked onto black. He flat out asked if that shadow was his familiar. Cue the internal panic. Jamie had been busting his back to keep his little pet off the radar for as long as humanly possible. This completely derailed his master plan, since exposing his summon was strictly off-limits, leaving him blindsided by the worst kind of jump scare out of absolutely nowhere. His mask slipped for a split second. All that effort to keep this secret buried just instantly up in smoke. Time to improvise. Totally oblivious to Jamie's internal freakout, his dad started grilling him about the magical creature's shape, sizing it up, and casually guessing. It was basically a bat. Kicking himself over the fact that his old man instantly sniffed out its dark magic origins, Jamie scrambled for an excuse. He spun a lie claiming he molded it into a bat and kept his mouth shut, just to hit him with an epic surprise later. Realizing this magical flex was entirely his son's doing, the guy was absolutely stunned. He pulled him into a massive bear hug, practically bursting with pride over his heir's god-tier talent. The second the door clicked shut, Jamie was drained. He dragged himself to his room to recharge his social battery. Utterly exhausted from starring in this fake family sitcom, he just couldn't vibe with a household that actually showed genuine affection, tossing hugs around freely while he was forced to play along. Cut to the city streets, where dusk had rolled in, and the locals were pouring out to blow off some steam after the daily grind. Blending right into the crowd, Jamie went full ghost mode. Rocking a hood to mask his identity, he slipped into the night. He pulled off this stealth mission all thanks to his familiar, a loyal shadow bound by its very code, to obey its creator without a single glitch. Our boy was on a hunt to figure out why some rogue cultists from a religion that already had major beef with him decided to crash his turf. And just like that, the midnight recon began. Using Black as his personal drone, he hijacked a bird's-eye view, locking onto the neon-lit streets below. It didn't take long before he intercepted a shady conversation between two goons chilling on some crates. They were sweating over their next move, totally stressing about the orders handed down by the big bosses they were trying to impress. Guy number 1, Philip, basically a mid-level manager in an underground syndicate called Livel, who was heavily regretting signing up for this mess. His buddy Jans was way more unhinged, just a low-level grunt, but sharp enough to know the higher-ups were literally throwing half their squad under the bus for a quick payday. In their eyes, Haste was usually a safe zone. The Count here would conveniently ignore the mob, as long as they didn't cross any major red lines. But human trafficking, yeah, that was an instant death wish. Still, The other dude couldn't stop obsessing over the insane payout, thinking this risk could literally rocket them out of the gutters. Sure, the odds of surviving this heist were practically zero, making it a seriously toxic gamble. It was an absolute house of cards, volatile as a spark in a hurricane. If they got busted, the fallout would be legendary. You had to factor in the Count's extreme obsession with his own kids. If he caught a single whisper about a child trafficking ring operating in his backyard, the man would go scorched earth, ripping the city apart piece by piece. It was no joke, literally that same day the entire criminal underworld would be wiped from existence. The Count absolutely had the firepower to delete them. Yet somehow the mastermind running this whole op was completely delusional, convinced they could ghost the authorities and bag all the loot without a single scratch. The grunts were totally clueless on how they'd outsmart an absolute unit like the Swordmaster. Even though rumors claimed Hani's crew had their backs, that info did absolutely zero to calm the other guy's nerves. These two were stuck between a rock and a hard place. They had to choose between executing an order that screamed suicide mission, fleeing for their lives, or ratting out the architect behind this whole nightmare. Bound by the streets, they finally realized their best play was to pin the blame on someone else entirely. Reporting it was completely off the table. Their only shot at surviving this mess was to pack up, lay low, and vanish. Going off the grid blind wouldn't cut it though. This syndicate had eyes everywhere and would tear the entire territory apart just to hunt them down. Right now, their entire game plan boiled down to one pathetic goal: buying themselves just a few more days of breathing room. They needed to hustle hard. Every second counted, and they had to stall the hunters until they could scrape together enough gear to actually disappear. Both of them were absolutely fuming. Tossing their comfortable lives into the trash for some wild, deadly goose chase was not on their bingo card. And all of this was happening because some higher-up pitched a human trafficking ring, a total garbage idea that was doomed to fail from day one. Sure, their boss was basically a pushover, but greenlighting a shady operation this insanely risky, that completely blew their minds. The hair on the back of their necks suddenly stood up. Stepping out of the shadows was a literal kid, proving he had been eavesdropping this whole time. They had just dropped the most classified top-tier syndicate secrets out in the open. The tension in the alley instantly skyrocketed. They were desperately trying to scrub their tracks and keep their circle totally closed, and now this random brat just crashed their private pity party. Jamie just stood there flashing a cocky smirk. He knew he held all the winning cards in this little standoff. Tilting his head, he dared them to ask the real question. Did they even have a clue who they were dealing with? These thugs were not in the mood for riddles. If even a whisper of their syndicate's plans leaked out, they were dead meat. Zero hesitation. One of the goons launched a brutal right hook straight at the kid's face, aiming to permanently silence their little spy. The second thug, a massive branch boss, instantly backed him up, lunging forward to finish the job. They had crossed the point of no return. This stranger had to be erased. But right as their fists were about to connect, Jamie just evaporated into thin air. Their knuckles hit nothing but empty space instantly, sending a shockwave of pure panic through their veins. Letting this kid slip away meant signing their own death warrants. He was a walking time bomb who could spill their secrets, straight to the heavy hitters who would gladly wipe them out. Before they could even blink, a chilling voice echoed from right behind them, calling them absolute brats. Jamie casually mentioned that their little conversation was way too spicy for him to just walk away without doing a full interrogation. He dropped down right in their blind spot. The thugs flinched hard, absolutely terrified that this pint-sized kid possessed such insane agility. Stepping up, he demanded the full scoop on their little dilemma. And just to establish the brutal power gap between them, Jamie unleashed a suffocating wave of pure mana, slamming it right into their chests. The message was loud and clear. They were completely outmatched. The syndicate members were paralyzed. Their brains short-circuited, trying to process this insane twist, leaving them totally helpless. As this overpowered kid laid down the law, it did not take long for them to crack under the pressure and spill every single detail. Lying was totally off the table when you had a god-tier menace breathing down your neck. The two terrified criminals hated playing the traitor card, but self-preservation kicked in hard. Surviving this monstrous kid was way more important than protecting the garbage bosses who threw them under the bus in the first place. Jamie soaked up every word like a sponge, his blood slowly starting to boil. A child trafficking ring. This was the absolute lowest of the low. It was the exact type of filth his father despised more than anything breathing. Jamie could barely wrap his head around the sheer stupidity of these guys, actually thinking they could get away with selling human lives for a quick cash grab. Did they seriously think karma would not catch up? The idea that corrupt elites played God with human lives, turning lackeys into mindless chess pieces, absolutely disgusted him. They just followed orders like total sheep. But what really bugged Jamie was why the big bosses at the top thought they could pull this off without triggering a massive war. Anyone with a working brain knew the Count's fierce reputation. He would burn their whole operation to the ground. As Jamie pieced the puzzle together, a heavy, unexplainable dread settled in his gut. Time was up. He needed to wrap this little interrogation up. Focusing his mana, he locked onto their minds to completely wipe his own presence from their memories. He planted a deep hypnotic command right into their brains, an order they literally could not resist. He commanded the duo to march straight to the Count's estate and sing like canaries. Like absolute zombies, the two thugs snapped to their feet, their eyes totally glazed over as they moved out to execute their new mission. They were heading straight into the lion's den. Jamie smirked, knowing that the second the sun came up, absolute chaos would flood the streets. His dad was going to go nuclear and rip the entire syndicate out by its roots. While Jamie started plotting his next epic power move, the two brainwashed syndicate goons marched blindly toward the massive estate, completely dead to the world around them. Jamie's mind control magic was genuinely terrifying. Deciding it was time to play it smart and stop pushing his luck, he called upon his loyal shadow, Familiar Black, to pull him out. Black instantly answered the call, flooding the alleyway with a thick pool of dark mana. It wrapped around Jamie, acting as the perfect camouflage to slip away, completely erasing him from the grim scene. He did not even need to take a single step to pull off the ultimate escape. Out of nowhere, a literal human body gets launched past Jamie. Yeah, he definitely wasn't alone in this alley. He locked eyes with the airborne dude who looked absolutely wrecked, completely outmatched, and backed into a corner. The guy's face was a whole mess of pure panic, zero comprehension, and absolute ugly crying. He was totally helpless. But before Jamie could even process that boom, another body came crashing through the air, tossed like a rag doll by someone way out of his league. Jamie instantly went on high alert, scanning his surroundings. He had to brace for a jump scare. In a sketchy zone like this, literally anything could pop out from the shadows. Then it echoed down the street, some arrogant voice from the darkness, just ruthlessly roasting the two guys who got tossed. Jamie tuned out the noise, trying to pinpoint exactly who he was dealing with. The loudmouth wasn't solo, he had backup. His goons were actually trying to shush him, whispering that all this yelling was going to pull security right to their VIP brawl. But Jamie unbothered. He stepped up with main character energy and casually asked where this psycho, screaming in the dead of night, crawled out from. Honestly, Jamie was low-key furious. How dare this random lay a finger on his personal pawns? These guys were supposed to run an epic side quest for him, and now it was totally derailed. Plans ruined. It was payback time. He was about to give this so-called gang boss a harsh reality check and flex what real terrifying power actually looked like compared to that weak display. The cloaked mage locked his door aura onto the squad. They had zero clue who they were messing with, just staring blindly at his hidden face. Just by stepping up, he literally paused the Grim Reaper for his two beaten lackeys. But that borrowed time wasn't free. He mentally commanded them to finish the job. Meanwhile, Hani, the mid-tier boss of the rival crew, stepped up and ordered his minions to drag the two bruised thugs and the cloaked kid over to him, acting completely out of pocket. He taunted the boy in black. "Why open your mouth?" he sneered, asking if he wanted a one-way ticket to the afterlife too. Jamie just stared at the loudmouth, trying to bait him. This NPC seriously had no idea the absolute nightmare he was about to trigger with that trash talk. Hani's goons roughly grabbed Jamie's two pawns, who had just dodged a bullet thanks to the mage, only to end up right back at square one. One of the dudes broke down, sobbing. He knew it was over. He felt completely pathetic. Getting flatlined now or in 60 minutes didn't make a difference. Fighting back was literally pointless. But the cloaked prodigy, he was chilling, silently calculating the exact frame data needed to pull off his next move. He didn't want to overkill them right away. Priority one was keeping his own vibe flawless while shielding the two extras he'd cast for his little revenge theater. Then out of nowhere, flash, one of the rival goons blitzed him. A brutal strike blew a massive gaping hole straight through the left side of the kid's skull. The combo didn't stop. The cloaked body was suddenly shredded into human Swiss cheese. It looked like game over for Jamie. Hani burst out laughing, watching this brave kid get obliterated so badly, he couldn't even scream. It was supposed to be a humiliating, agonizing end. Hani's ego was through the roof. Feeling like an untouchable god, he strolled closer to the bloodbath, craving to hear the mysterious edgelord beg for mercy. But wait, the camera cuts. Empty space. The wizard's mangled corpse gone, vanished into thin air, and bodies definitely don't just glitch out of reality. One of Hani's lackeys looked down, his brain short-circuiting, the mangled corpse bleeding out at their feet. It was Finn, their own teammate. Hani froze, absolutely baffled. He vividly remembered melting the kid in the black cloak. He never laid a finger on Finn. Then the cinematic hair-raising moment, a chilling whisper brushed against the back of Hani's neck. Jamie was right behind him, brutally roasting the boss for pulling a friendly fire fail. Panic spiked. Hani whipped around, desperate to catch a glimpse of the ghost he just supposedly flatlined. But Jamie sidestepped the reaction swing and teleported away in a blink. Flexing his insane speed, the boy materialized right in his face. "Did you have fun packing up your own minion?" Instead of hitting your actual target, Jamie was thriving right now. He had outplayed the Reaper entirely. used an illusion to force his enemy into team killing, and heavily tilted the raid boss. Hani's mind was spinning with questions. Who the hell was this cloaked phantom? How did he survive? Was that pile of burning ash on the pavement actually all that was left of poor Finn? And the biggest red flag, what was this suffocating pitch-black aura wrapping around the young mage like a demon? Jamie just smirked. He dropped a cold warning, don't act tough, and rush in blindly when your mana is stuck at a pathetic level 3, because in this lobby he was completely outmatched. This syndicate branch boss wasn't about to just take the L and roll over, fighting tooth and nail right down to the wire in a desperate bid to break free from the mage's suffocating grip. Bro whipped out third-tier explosion magic to get the job done. Sure, it didn't pack that god-tier 5th-class punch, but it still hit like an absolute truck. He was dead set on incinerating this kid's tiny frame, turning the very brat who just clowned him into absolute ash. A blinding spark ignited between them, the supposed grand finale of this clash, which had completely derailed thanks to Jamie's galaxy brain deception. Yet our boy didn't even flinch. He straight up mocked him, claiming that when facing a true powerhouse, people morph into pathetic, fragile puppets, completely at the mercy of their master. That is exactly why he found it so incredibly satisfying to brainwash arrogant fools, who actually thought they stood a chance against his magic. A mere handful of seconds passed, before the boss completely collapsed, violently hitting his knees in a display of total helplessness. That cocky mobster energy from a minute ago, completely wiped out, replaced by raw agony in his final miserable moments. His lackeys watched the whole thing go down their jaws practically on the floor, seeing their boss get absolutely folded, with zero sweat broken. That massive reality check made one thing crystal clear: they were up against an absolute monster. They needed to dip, fast, before his ruthless wrath locked onto them next. Following their leader's brutal takedown, instead of begging or yapping, these goons basically accepted their fate, cursing their totally garbage luck for even stepping foot in this area today. The same guys who were just plotting their great escape from a battle, screaming guaranteed game over, suddenly realized they were boxed in. No exit, no hope. With one lethal, calculated step, Jamie could snuff them out, sending them to the Shadow Realm before their brains even processed the threat. And that is exactly what went down. Flashing a darkly satisfied smirk at their sheer terror, the young mage simply clenched his fist and permanently hit the mute button on their suffering. Dusting off his hands, he spun back to his original target, the big boss, now surrounded by his fallen crew, ready to squeeze him dry for his own personal agenda. Zero hesitation, zero questions asked. He viciously yanked the dude up by his hair, dragging his battered face forward to ensure he was fully locked in for the ultimate command, about to drop. Step 1. Jamie needed him to spill every single ounce of top-secret intel locked in that skull. Because, let us be real, holding the title of branch manager meant this guy had VIP access to the underground's darkest secrets. Absolutely scrambled by the crushing magical pressure from those final hits, the boss was stripped of his free will, transformed into an obedient, mindless zombie, forced to blindly echo his new master's commands. Like a broken record, he spilled the entire disgusting blueprint regarding the underground child trafficking ring. Honestly, this wasn't a shocker to our boy, having already extracted the same sick details from his previous victims. But this juicy confession proved that the black market rumors were 100% legit, giving him the perfect leverage to finally force a heavy confession out of his own father. Now came the real headache: what to do with this shattered gang leader. Even though Jamie barely flexed on him physically, the guy's soul was utterly annihilated. The physical shell remained intact, but the Grim Reaper was already knocking. Normally, a third-tier magic user biting the dust like this would instantly respawn as an undead minion. But with his soul shredded into pixel dust, this body was destined to rot fast, bringing a horribly grotesque vibe to the area. Out in the blood-soaked trenches of a war zone, totally normal. But dropping a decaying zombie in the middle of a populated city, that was a fast track to mass panic. Jamie knew he had hit a dead end here. He desperately needed a cleaner alternative to sweep this mess under the rug without triggering a massive headache for himself or sparking citywide chaos. Then it clicked. A third-tier magic caster was basically a walking, breathing battery, packed with a massive mana reserve. Time to get a little creative with recycling. Extending his hand toward the limp, broken figure, he initiated a brutal drain, mercilessly siphoning every last drop of lingering magical energy. He pulled the raw power deeper into his core with every ticking second. After several intense minutes, the recharge was complete. He felt insanely revitalized, his internal balance totally locked back in after the grueling clash. Sure, the host's physical limits meant the stolen mana was laced with some nasty impurities, but gobbling up that much raw energy was a massive ultimate buff for future battles. With the boss handled, his eyes shifted to his original two victims, the very dudes he had caught lacking during that sneaky eavesdropping session, now parked on the ground like obedient dogs awaiting commands. Even though he forcefully pumped mana back into their veins to keep them breathing, their life force was dropping dangerously low. He needed a clutch play right now, or these valuable pawns would bleed out for literally no reason. A crazy high IQ strategy instantly popped into his head, the perfect shortcut to execute his master plan without burning extra time or stamina. To pull this off, he just had to manifest the dark magic of black. So who was going to step up and act as the ultimate mana battery for this insane stunt? Boom. His loyal familiar popped into existence, ready to drop everything and serve Jamie without a second thought. Since he could not just flat out execute these guys, they still had unfinished business. Jamie tapped into the darkest art of all necromancy. It was the only viable play he had left. We are talking about straight-up puppeteering corpses. Sure, it mimics resurrection, but absolutely zero free will is included in the package. These walking flesh puppets, yeah, they were officially stripped of their life rights. Necromancy spits right in the face of logic and Mother Nature. It is pure, unadulterated paranormal chaos. And starting right now, these two dudes were permanently on his undead payroll. They were stuck walking around as mindless meat shields, completely defying the cycle of life and death, existing solely to execute his every command. But to pull off this massive middle finger to reality, Jamie desperately needed his shadow pet to keep the magic stable so he did not blow himself up. The loyal beast did not even blink, flooding the fresh zombies with a massive wave of backup mana, effectively locking in their mental tether to their master. Fully charged and backed up, our boy pushed the ritual into overdrive, ready to forge the ultimate mindless action figures. But even as he pumped raw magic into their veins to kickstart their dead muscles, granting them a fake illusion of life, something started glitching. These guys were actively fighting back, desperately clinging to whatever shred of their souls remained. It was honestly pathetic. After the absolute physical beatdown they just took over the last few hours, their odds of pulling through were practically non-existent. Jamie literally offered them the ultimate cheat code, an immortal shell, completely immune to human pain and fatal damage. Yet they still resisted. Suddenly their eyes glazed over with this freaky hollow glow, flashing the exact signal that the spell was finally taking root. Not wasting a single heartbeat, Jamie sped up the incantation to seal the deal, refusing to leave them even a sliver of a chance to snap back to reality. The purple-haired guy broke first, his human consciousness completely shattering as his mind plunged into a dark, endless void. He let out an absolutely blood-curdling shriek as the dark magic violently mutated his body from the inside out. Seconds later, his buddy suffered the exact same fate. Rest in peace to their humanity, they were officially full-blown walking corpses. Black was the absolute hard carry in all of this, working overtime to feed Jamie a massive, unending stream of raw magic power. Jamie stared down at his new creations intensely, praying this crazy gamble actually paid off, and he had secured his elite undead squad. The second words spilled from their dead lips. It confirmed his total absolute domination. He owned them now. But hold up. A split second later, a chilling vibe made him question if the spell actually worked flawlessly, because lurking right behind, pitch black, otherworldly aura oozed off their bodies like absolute nightmare fuel. The duo just stared right through him, their eyes totally hollow as they processed their new reality. But after that chaotic ritual, Black started tweaking, pacing around like he sensed a massive glitch in the Matrix, leaving Jamie totally clueless. The kid snapped at his familiar to zip it, and stopped stressing heavily, implying that having zero doubts was mandatory for their master plan to actually work. He was dead set on the fact that his little buddy had nailed the execution perfectly. So he tried brushing off the panic, aiming to keep the vibe stable. Deep down though, Jamie swallowed his pride and realized he fumbled the bag himself. He kinda saw this epic fail coming, but watching his own flawed handiwork play out was a tough pill to swallow. Even though he didn't want to ego trip over his past overpowered status, catching himself making total rookie mistakes still stung horribly. Messing up a basic entry-level summoning, he seriously debated just scrapping these two unlucky test subjects right then and there. If they couldn't execute his flawless strategy, they were just straight-up dead weight. Walking around, leaking abyss-level dark energy meant sneaking into Janice's holy turf or even grabbing a drink at a local pub was completely off the table. Their stealth stats were literally at zero. Meanwhile, Black was acting super unhinged, doing absolutely everything in his power to snap his spacing-out master back to reality. To finally get Jamie to look down, the Shadow Beast literally chomped onto his cheek, practically screaming that he was ready to carry the team on his back. Jamie flared up low-key offended that his minion would disrespect the boss hierarchy like that. But once he snapped out of his funk and actually locked eyes with Black, the creature smoothly drifted down, right onto the skull of one of the fresh zombies staring intensely. By channeling his focus, the familiar could hijack their dark aura, basically giving their chaotic undead models a much-needed stealth patch. Watching that massive demonic smokescreen vanish left Jamie absolutely hyped. He had no clue his pet skill tree was this broken. Black flexed his abilities right then and there, proving He was the ultimate ride-or-die sidekick, ready to clutch up whenever things went south. He straight up vacuumed every ounce of that busted dark energy that was ruining the zombies' stealth capabilities, clearing the stage so his master could shine again. Cue the glow-up. The two corpses reverted to looking like totally average NPCs, perfectly matching the master's original sneaky blueprints. Jamie did a quick visual sweep of the room, scanning for any extra traps or glitches that might derail his plot. But instead of danger, he just spotted his bloated familiar, totally gassed out. After tanking all the rogue magic that Jamie accidentally spilled, the necromancer immediately showered his pet with hype, praising the little guy for saving the whole tactical operation from flopping. Pivoting back to his fresh mob drops, he figured it was time for an unboxing, giving them official titles and just enough brain cells to run basic errands. Jens was getting a rebrand as Ozard. It perfectly matched his menacing, super toxic villain aesthetic. Meanwhile, Philip got hit with the tag Rizal, a nod to his beastly blood-sucking vibe that totally contradicted his pathetic begging from before. Jamie sparked them up with a single activation command, flashing a smug grin, because he literally owned these two trapped souls' body and mind now. At the drop of a syllable, the undead duo snapped to attention, completely locked in and ready to execute whatever unhinged side quest their boss threw at them. He could literally flick his wrist and their hollow eyes would track the movement, mechanically processing their next waypoint based on his voice. Honestly, the whole scene was insanely ironic, considering 5 minutes ago, these dudes were scheming a grand escape to start fresh and ditch the shady syndicate. Fast forward and they're right back to being corporate slaves, just, as literal rotting meat puppets this time. The brain-dead duo just kept staring at Jamie's hand like a buffering video, completely frozen without a direct prompt or any shred of free will. Jamie realized their operating systems were still booting up, needing a hot second to calibrate, because their flesh avatars couldn't process the hardcore magical upgrade they just survived. Sinking to their knees, the husks bowed down, radiating absolute submission to the literal god who yanked them from the grave. Even if their new life was totally cursed. Out of nowhere, the newly minted Ozard rasped out a question asking if the kid was his maker, slowly piecing together the wild reality check. Jamie didn't even blink before dropping a hard yes, wanting to instantly hardwire the fact that creator meant absolute boss in their smooth brains, ensuring they'd be top-tier minions. Meanwhile, the confused zombie started questioning who this cloaked mystery guy. The kid standing across from him barely looked a day over 10, but the suffocating aura bleeding out of him, absolutely terrifying. It completely defied logic. For a split second, it felt like this pint-sized powerhouse had clawed his way straight out of some dark folklore, radiating a pure, unfiltered malice that had zero business existing in reality. As the clock ticked down, that primal dread just kept skyrocketing, the sickening pressure radiating off this so-called child making his skin crawl. And Jamie, he was absolutely eating it up, reading his new puppet's sheer panic like an open book. He didn't even bother masking his twisted grin, practically flaunting a god-level dominance that utterly crushed whatever defiance his victim had left. To the walking corpse staring him down, Jamie looked dead up like a demon lord. The sheer volume of raw, pitch-black mana swirling around him was a massive flex, screaming exactly who held all the cards here. Razel could only watch this nightmare unfold in absolute horror, mind blown that he had somehow stumbled into this literal hellscape, reduced to nothing more than a plaything for a total psychopath. Scraping together whatever pathetic shred of bravery he still had, he balled his trembling hands into fists, trying to project a tough guy vibe, even though he was basically a shackled dog. Razel barked out that he didn't care if he was dealing with the demon lord himself, but there was no shot. The thing in front of him was human, not while rocking the body of a grade schooler. Instead of getting mad, Jamie actually found it hilarious. Their pointless little rebellion was highly entertaining, but playtime was over. It was time to teach these mutts how to properly grovel before their master. Low-key, he knew this was on him. He had botched the initial brainwashing, failing to perfectly wipe their minds and chain them at the actual soul level. But our boy wasn't about to just let that slide, stepping up to forcefully rewrite their reality, so his grandmaster plan went off without a single hitch. Just a subtle flick of the wrist. Boom. One of the guys face planted straight into the dirt, instantly paralyzed, and entirely at Jamie's mercy. Jamie went full savage on purpose, laying down the brutal law to show them exactly what happens when you cross your new boss. Absolute blind loyalty was his non-negotiable rule. Letting the silence stretch, he locked eyes with them, and warned them that they got a free pass today, but if they ever glared at him like that again, game over. Dead serious, Jamie swore he would vaporize anyone who even pretended they still had free will, or stepped out of line. The second dude was just standing there, bug-eyed brain, totally short-circuiting at the threat. Seeing his former buddy kiss the pavement so fast, he knew instantly he had to follow suit, and play it insanely safe. Meanwhile, the Dark Mage calmly analyzed the two stolen souls now tethered to his own, knowing full well that whatever they actually wanted didn't matter. The blood pact was sealed, making them absolute slaves to his commands. He literally owned them, holding the power of life and death in his palms, the absolute unbreakable law of the dark arts. But plotting his next move, he figured dialing back the supreme evil act just a fraction might work in his favor, deciding to drop a massive truth bomb on his new pets. Shrugging his tiny shoulders, he casually admitted that, despite the killer aura, he wasn't some mythic demon lord. Nope, they were just staring at a regular dude orchestrating this entire chaotic masterpiece. Shaking off a sliver of his terror, Razel choked out a question. If he wasn't a demon, then what exactly was he? Because that suffocating pressure, 0% ordinary. Smirking like he just won the lottery, Jamie dropped the lore. He was a dark sorcerer who had literally thrown down with the gods. A menace who never compromised on his ultimate endgame, no matter how wild things got. Pivoting instantly, he laid out their one and only mission, ghost the Church of Zenith, and vacuum up every single piece of intel they could scrape together. On top of that, he threw in a side quest track, down the specific scumbag, running the local human trafficking ring, and drag him back breathing. He needed actionable intel, not more mindless zombies. Taking the hint, his newly minted lackeys dropped their heads, not daring to breathe a word of protest. They were officially in the system, hardwired to execute whatever insane scheme their boss dreamed up. Risking a quick glance upward to see if the cloaked terror was still hovering over them, one of them let out a massive, shaky breath. The spot where Jamie just stood was completely dead empty. The kid had ghosted them, leaving them stranded in the alley, to somehow process the absolute fever dream they had just survived. Locking eyes, they shared a silent, totally bewildered look, having zero clue how to even begin navigating this insane new reality. But before they could spiral, the mind control kicked into high gear, forcefully wiping their panic and spinning them right toward the church. They bolted out, perfectly programmed to deliver exactly what the Dark Mage ordered. Cut to an alley across the street, where Jamie's magical familiar was fiercely debating his owner, while the kid barely paid him any attention. Jamie effortlessly shut Black down, metaphorically yanking the invisible leash of submission, so tight that open rebellion was literally impossible, no matter how pissed the familiar got. With that, handled the issue of his father. Taking down this underground smuggling ring, that was completely on him now, but honestly, crushing these scumbags would be an absolute breeze. Selling people crossed his ultimate red line. Plus, there was absolutely zero chance he was just going to ignore the trash polluting his backyard. After all, he was the heir, and this entire territory was destined to fall right into his lap anyway. But right now, the clock was ticking. He had been sneaking around in the dark for way too long. If the maids or his parents caught him missing from his bed, his cover was completely blown. Muttering under his breath, he signaled that it was time to dip. He expected his magical familiar to just teleport them back, but out of absolutely nowhere, a massive thud slammed right into his spine. It happened so fast that his insane reflexes didn't even trigger. Spinning around with pure murder in his eyes, his glare softened slightly. Some random kid had basically bulldozed into him, clearly sprinting for his life without checking his blind spots. Still, a supreme being trapped in a kid's body doesn't just let disrespect slide. His annoyance instantly spiked over this pathetic disruption. Sure, accidents happen, but touching a grand mage, major mistake. He was seconds away from completely obliterating this clumsy pedestrian. He paused, catching himself right before unleashing chaos. It was literally just a terrified brat, definitely not an assassin. And the absolute irony, Jamie entirely forgot his own avatar right now was a literal kid, a fact the sniveling boy aggressively pointed out. You see, with a mind forged over centuries of bloodshed, he naturally forgot he was currently just a 9-year-old child. Trapped in this tiny frame, he put on his best boss aura. Sighing deeply, he promised to let the kid walk away intact this once. He dropped a heavy warning to watch his surroundings, secretly acknowledging that starting a street brawl over a bumped shoulder was low-key embarrassing. The grounded kid just stared at him, absolutely baffled. Why was a pint-sized peer lecturing him like a battle-hardened war veteran? The math simply wasn't mathing. Suddenly, the kid found his voice roasting Jamie for acting like a boomer when he didn't even have a single gray strand on his head. Apparently, silver hair equaled supreme authority in this kid's brain. That incredibly bizarre logic threw the dark mage completely off guard. Facing such a hilariously stupid comeback, Jamie genuinely blanked. How do you even counter that? The kid wasn't technically wrong about the hair color, but using it as a metric for maturity was absolutely unhinged. Locking eyes with the brat trembling in the dirt, Jamie noticed something super suspicious out of the corner of his eye. His own hair was glowing, a totally different shade, practically screaming that his shadow pet was interfering. Black was playing games behind his back. The absolute audacity of his familiar to physically block him from catching a body was insane. Since when did his shadow minion develop a conscience? Pushing that annoyance aside, he locked a death glare on the shivering child. He delivered one final bone-chilling warning: keep your mouth shut, or face consequences worse than death. The temperature in the alley basically dropped to sub-zero. The immense killing intent hit the kid so hard, he was practically holding back tears. Survival instincts finally kicked in. The kid scrambled forward, sputtering frantic apologies to avoid getting erased from existence. Seeing his master choose peace over an unnecessary massacre, the shadowy familiar internally celebrated. With the crisis averted, Black finally triggered their escape route. But they had burned way too much time playing around in the streets. They needed to warp straight to his bedroom instantly, or the entire household would flip out. The moment his boots hit his actual floorboards, Black instantly went into full pout mode, acting totally betrayed by the scolding. Jamie literally ignored the guilt trip. The shadowy pup knew exactly why he was in the doghouse. You simply do not restrict a dark wizard's movements. Promising a much worse beatdown if mutiny ever crossed his mind again, Jamie watched the shadow entity dramatically sulk in the corner. Honestly, he had no idea who taught his pet to be this soft. Completely drained, the tiny mage absolutely face-planted into his mattress. The brutal physical toll of running Black Ops all night suddenly slammed into him like a freight train. Burning through that much mana was definitely not part of his original schedule. Moving forward, his calendar was going to be packed with carnage. So much for laying low and enjoying a peaceful, stress-free second life, right? Because out of all the insane plot twists, the divine scum he despised the most, Zenith was already digging his claws into this territory. Just thinking that cursed name made his tiny knuckles crack. Pure, unadulterated hatred practically venomized his bloodstream. That fake deity had ruined his entire past existence. Now, the only thing on Jamie's menu was a very slow, highly destructive revenge. Staring at the ceiling, he essentially trash-talked the heavens. Zenith could spawn an army of zealots for all he cared. It wouldn't change a single thing. The absolute bloodlust radiating from the boy's glowing eyes was terrifyingly authentic. He was breathing for one specific purpose, now dragging that corrupt god straight down to hell. Meanwhile, back in the grimy city streets, his mind-controlled pawns were finally making their move. Assad stepped out of the shadows, ready to ambush his old crew. They needed answers, and fast. Where was the top dog running this whole twisted human trafficking ring? The thug's jaw practically hit the floor. He had literally seen Jens as a lifeless corpse, yet here this guy was breathing and asking questions. His brain totally short-circuited. Hanny promised he was going to wipe both of them off the map, yet Jens was standing right there fully intact. It hit him like a truck. His partner must have gotten absolutely wrecked by the dude who couldn't even use a single drop of mana. To jog the terrified guy's memory, Jens slammed his fist into the brick wall, mere inches from the thug's nose. Dust crumbled. The unspoken threat was loud and clear. The next punch was caving his face in. Jens was running out of patience. He had a strict mission from his master, and he wasn't about to fail. There was zero time for a slow interrogation. Trembling, the syndicate lackey spilled, claiming absolute radio silence from the rest of the crew. If the gang found out Jens rose from the dead, it would be pure, unadulterated chaos. Knowing his squad had likely been wiped out, the thug desperately scrambled to save his own skin, stuttering out that he had no clue where the boss vanished to. But before he could even finish his sentence, a second undead enforcer materialized right behind him. This guy commanded way more respect and gave off an insane boss-level aura that completely dominated the room. Philip, cold as ice, leaned in and demanded to know if the thug was actually spitting facts or just trying to buy time. Sweating bullets, the hostage swore on his life. It was the absolute truth. If they didn't believe him, they could literally go ask anyone else in the gang. This was getting ridiculous. They needed the head honcho to finish their quest. Since the boss pulled the strings in the shadows, he knew every dirty little secret pulsing through the city streets. That meant he definitely held the missing puzzle pieces about the church. Realizing threats weren't working, Philip switched tactics. Instead of asking for exact coordinates, he demanded an educated guess. Where would a rat like that scurry off to? No more dodging. The trapped gangster knew he had to drop a solid lead right now, or these two superpowered zombies were going to end his subscription to life. Playing it safe, he tipped them off that the boss was a total party animal. He loved knocking back drinks and flirting, making the gang's underground VIP clubs the perfect hunting ground. The two undead exchanged a silent look. It tracked perfectly. Crashing the local syndicate bars was their best shot at catching their target slipping. The hostage let out a massive sigh of relief, genuinely believing he had just talked his way out of an early grave. He thought he was home free. Bam! The stronger enforcer instantly hooked him across the jaw, knocking his lights out and completely shattering his hopes of walking away intact. They weren't just leaving him there. Their master strictly commanded them to drag back a living witness, and this unconscious clown was the perfect ticket to exposing the horrific child smuggling ring. But now, they had a slight logistical headache. Where do you stash a kidnapped mobster? They debated chaining him up in the creepy woods, but the other vetoed that, suggesting they just toss him in their own private warehouse instead. It was way more secure and totally off the grid. So Azar casually slung the unconscious guy over his shoulder, and they dipped. Frustrated that they had burned so much time on an interrogation that barely gave them a crumb of a lead. Cut to a different part of the city. A figure was prying open the door to a notorious shady dive bar, usually swarming with the worst scum imaginable. But right now, it was a ghost town. With every single step he took, he stumbled across more lifeless bodies. He practically slipped on the thick pools of crimson painting the hardwood floor. It was the exact same street kid who crashed into Jamie earlier. His eyes were wide with pure terror, his brain completely unable to process the absolute massacre in front of him. What kind of monster did this? He tried to block out the horrifying reality that every single person in the room had been brutally slaughtered. Safe to say, he wasn't going to get any answers out of these guys anytime soon. Just 5 minutes ago, he was sweating over getting beat up for leaving a gate unlocked. Now, the guys who used to bully him were permanently offline. Survival instincts kicked in. He spun on his heels and bolted, knowing if backup arrived, he'd be dead meat just for seeing the aftermath. Meanwhile, the vibe was night and day over at the Count's estate. Golden morning sunlight spilled through the massive windows, bringing a false sense of peace to the start of the day. But he knew deep down today was going to be radically different, and dodging it wasn't an option. The young master let out a heavy sigh, mentally bracing himself for a grueling schedule he was totally dreading. He didn't have a say in the matter, so he just had to lock in. He threw on his clothes, prepping to face the music, ready to tackle the inevitable responsibilities waiting outside his door. Taking one last breath, he locked eyes with his magical familiar. He had to quickly kill the connection. His dad's radar was acting up, sensing someone was lurking around. Showtime. Jamie slapped on his perfect sun mask, strolling into the dining room to drop his usual morning greetings. But only his dad replied. His mom, completely missing in action from the breakfast table. The head of the house was totally chill, flashing a warm smile and asking how he slept. Jamie almost sighed in relief at her absence, until he spotted a familiar lock of hair peeking out, proving the universe still hated him. Boom, ambush. She practically tackled him with a massive bear hug, going through major withdrawal since he ghosted them yesterday. He hated it. But he was locked into this golden child performance, and there was no escaping the stage. So he played it cool, acting completely oblivious to her super obvious hiding spot, a total fake-out. In reality, he spotted her miles away, just praying he could delay his daily dose of torture a few seconds longer. His mom was practically glowing, totally hyping herself up over her successful sneak attack. She eagerly asked if she spooked him, but Jamie smoothly spun it, claiming it was more of a blessing than a jump scare. The lady was absolutely obsessed. With him acting this sweet, she was ready to glue herself to his side 24/7. Desperate to hit the brakes, Jamie casually tried steering the vibe toward the food. He needed anything to break her suffocating, super clingy affection that he was barely tolerating. Plot twist: a double team. Now, his little sister joined the fray, trapping him in a two-way hug sandwich. They were basically trying to smother him with weaponized family love. He finally fought his way out, demanding his basic right to eat, officially kicking off the meal that got hijacked by this cringe cuddle fest. His mom swiftly shifted her radar to her next target, the little sister, who totally ate up the attention without a fight. She was practically beaming, soaking in all that pure affection. Catching this, Jamie actually had a split-second glitch. He seriously felt the urge to squish his sister's ridiculously chubby, soft cheeks. It was nearly impossible to resist. But reality crashed back down, and he instantly mentally slapped himself for letting his guard down and going off script. As the plates cleared, the family started hyping up some massive event dropping tomorrow. Jamie was completely out of the loop. Still distracting his sister, he shot his dad a questioning look. He needed the tea on tomorrow's schedule. A guy had to stay updated on family lore, let alone city gossip. Argino blinked, genuinely shook that he forgot to brief his oldest son on the upcoming chaos. A flash of dad guilt hit him. His mom immediately chimed in, dodging the blame by claiming it slipped her mind too. She used her chronic mom worry as the ultimate shield. Jamie instantly connected the dots. She was definitely stressing over that day she caught him pulling off that crazy full-body breathing technique. Knowing her dramatic personality, that visual definitely gave her major nightmares. Feeling a bit awkward, Jamie dropped a quick strategic apology for spiking her blood pressure, partly out of guilt, but mostly to lock in those trust points. But his mom waved it off, vowing she was solid. As long as her kids were breathing, she practically begged them to keep a low profile so her heart could catch a break. Because if Jamie kept pulling stunts like that, she threatened to literally collapse in the hallway and ugly cry from the stress. Snapping back to the main quest, Jamie pushed for details on tomorrow's mysterious hype. Turns out they were crashing a massive elite gala thrown by the Counts of Simon and Welton. Basically every high roller in the Eastern Kingdom of Seldom was on the VIP list. Historically, kids were banned, but they had leveled up in age, and his mom was absolutely living for the fantasy of showing them off at this fancy shindig. Jamie, however, internally screamed as his precious free time vanished into thin air. More mandatory family bonding, more playing the flawless golden boy. That meant he had to speedrun his current side quest. Before the ball, fast forward to nightfall, he threw on his cloak, time to slip into the shadows and ghost through the city. For this op, he tagged in his loyal magical sidekick, ordering him to track down their two undead minions, who were supposed to be grinding hard all day. A quick covert flight landed him right at his target drop zone. Touching down flawlessly, he sneaked over to check on his undead crew, who had actually knocked out a solid chunk of the work. From here, he stalked through the terrain totally solo, no longer needing Black to hold his hand. Meanwhile, a heavy door creaked open into a pitch-black room. The guests had finally clocked in to drop their status report for the day. Both looked dead serious. They knew this entire high-stakes operation rested right on their decaying shoulders. They needed to go all in. Jamie whipped back his hood, cutting straight to the chase about his commands, demanding to know their actual progress. One of the lackeys visibly flinched, stammering out a tense apology, before admitting they had hit a massive dead end regarding the Zenith Church. But the guy scrambled to save face quickly, promising that the target would be wiped off the map shortly. Surprisingly, our boy did not even blink. He knew the score even top-tier syndicate bosses could not crack highly classified intel in a single day. Without missing a beat, he pivoted to his second directive. Now this mission was a total dub. They dragged in a syndicate insider, a guy perfectly positioned to spill the tea on the underground trafficking ring. Straight to the Count, exactly as ordered. The captive scanned the dark room, his eyes locking onto the kid's signature hair. Absolute panic set in. As he connected the dots, the Welton bloodline was onto them, and his karma was knocking loudly at the door. The undead minions chimed in, revealing this trembling guy was actually a high-ranking crime lord. He already knew Hannibal was out for his blood, turning him into the ultimate desperate snitch. Azad chimed in with a quick warning, noting the captive was totally clueless about the specific details they actually cared about. Jamie just raised a hand, shutting that down. He smirked, knowing he possessed ways to rip the truth out way more efficiently. He signaled his crew to rip the cloth from the hostage's mouth, finally letting their brand new pawn speak. Before Jamie even dropped a single question, the criminal completely broke. He bawled that he was in the dark, begging for his life and swearing he would dig up whatever intel they needed. But playing the pity card was not going to work on our MC, a dude who routinely deployed utterly ruthless tactics to rip secrets straight from his enemies' minds. Jamie coldly stated that death was not on the menu today, but the guy had a job to do. Suddenly, an oppressive pitch-black aura erupted from the boy, radiating a terrifying dominance that demanded absolute submission. Tears streaming down his dirt-streaked face, the broken boss sobbed that he was down for whatever, even if he had to hunt down his own leader, pleading for just a shred of mercy. Honestly, the endless yapping was seriously annoying Jamie. The constant whining totally ruined his vibe, so with a lazy flick of his wrist, he instantly muted the guy. The captive's jaw moved, but dead silence echoed in the room. Jamie then stretched his hand out, hovering just inches above the hostage's skull, channeling a fierce surge of mana straight into his brain, hardwiring the exact mission directly into his subconscious. He planted a hypnotic directive march straight to the Count, and snitch on every single shadow operation the syndicate was running. This move was guaranteed to spark massive chaos, but that was exactly the master plan. A split second later, the hostage shot up, his eyes totally glossed over, looking like a literal zombie obsessed with a single, unshakable objective that had completely hijacked his mind. Without a backward glance, he staggered out the door, locked onto the Count's mansion, to execute his ultimate life-defining purpose. Jamie shot a cold glare at his crew, reminding them that feeling sorry for this pawn was a massive waste of energy. The syndicate would not even have time to hunt the snitch down because the Count was about to nuke their entire operation. Shifting focus, he locked eyes with his two most fiercely loyal undead guards. He ordered them to skip town immediately and lay low in the shadows, and honestly, they did not even question it. They were basically ride or die. Right then, Black fluttered up to Jamie, leaning in close to murmur secret intel straight into his ear. It was super stealthy, ensuring zero eavesdroppers could ruin the vibe. That is when our MC realized a major shift had gone down today. For the first time, his undead squad had not demanded any explanations. No pushback. No arguments whatsoever. Just straight-up flawless loyalty. The duo formally declared that whatever their young lord commanded was absolute law, requiring zero debate, and their only job was to follow his playbook blindly. The second minion chimed in, hinting that he already cracked the code on why they were being benched. He was totally on board with the strategy, acknowledging it was just pure objective logic. Because once Jamie's dad unleashed absolute hell on the criminal underworld, two random goons vanishing into thin air would not even make the radar. The world would just assume they got caught in the crossfire. Jamie nodded, dropping the detail that he was heading out of city limits for a couple of days. For everyone's safety, ghosting the area was their best bet, effectively scrubbing any trace connecting them back to the soon-to-be wrecked syndicate. Mission accomplished, our boy casually dipped out of the shady underground tavern, plotting his route back to the estate, to wrap things up under the radar. But wait, out of nowhere, one of his undead minions busted through the tavern doors, hollering for his boss like the literal apocalypse had just dropped. Jamie paused, totally thrown off. He had stepped outside for maybe 5 seconds. What kind of massive disaster could have popped off in that blink of an eye? Then it hit him. The panicked zombies shrieked, demanding to know what exactly had happened to their bodies. Sure, they fully accepted they were walking dead, and they made peace with that brutal fate, but this brand new physical transformation was tripping them out big time. There was zero chance of hitting the undo button, and honestly, they were totally cool with that. Getting a massive stat boost after dying was an absolute win, but they still needed to figure out exactly what kind of monsters they'd morphed into. When given the floor, the guy straight up pointed out how their physical specs had skyrocketed compared to when they were breathing. It was a total shock to the system, so he had to ask, did they hit the jackpot and spawn as elite tier undead, like actual boss-level threats? Jamie's response, a sudden burst of laughter that immediately sent the poor minion into a panic spiral. Felon scrambled to apologize, terrified he'd crossed a line. But honestly, our overpowered protagonist was just having a great time. Waving off the panic, Jamie assured him it was all good. His new subordinate was just genuinely hilarious. Their crazy ability to just roll with being undead cracked him up. Felon basically short-circuited, completely clueless on how to reply. He awkwardly blurted out a "thank you," praying he wasn't making a total fool of himself in front of his new boss. Dead serious, Jamie realized that, in his centuries of existence, he had never seen anything quite like this duo. Forget how innocent his current kid body looked. He knew firsthand that victims of this dark ritual usually suffered complete mental breakdowns, mutating into mindless raging ghouls. Yet these two were vibing perfectly. He'd literally struck gold. Finding two natural-born talents randomly wandering into his life was an insane stroke of luck. Breaking the news, he told them straight up they were basic zombies. No crazy cosmetic upgrades waiting for them. Even so, their raw physical power had multiplied way past any normal human's limits. It was all the intel the Walking Dead needed to piece together exactly how their new bodies operated. Knowing this was a massive turning point for them, Jamie threw out a smirk. He teased that if they kept grinding, they might actually level up to elite status. It was half joking, but that sliver of hope hit them right in the feels. Finally, a chance to be something epic, even if they had to literally die first to unlock the opportunity. Wrapping things up, he sent them off, drilling it into their heads to stay completely off the radar like he ordered. The tension had definitely vanished. The whole vibe was way more chill now, which caught Jamie off guard. They weren't tragic victims. They were absolutely fascinating. Honestly, they gave off major flashbacks to a certain kid he used to know. A kid who'd permanently burned himself into Jamie's brain. But nostalgia had to wait. He was running dangerously behind schedule. He needed to sprint home fast. Meanwhile, the Count was basically tearing the city apart that night. A massive underground syndicate had poisoned Hace, forcing his dad to cancel travel plans and go on an absolute warpath. He was staying behind to personally dismantle the mob before they could hijack the city for their sick operations. We're talking horrific stuff like child trafficking. Because of this chaos, only 3 of them were heading out to the massive eastern hub of Regan. Destination, that fancy gala they'd been prepping for. Honestly, Jamie couldn't help but think how much faster this trip would be if he could just spam teleportation magic. Still riding in a luxury carriage beat the brutal Dark Ages. The history books painted a pretty grim picture of what went down right after his original death. We're talking full-scale demon invasions and the literal Demon King dropping in. But plot twist, Jamie might be the one to shatter the world's current peace. Those 12 incompetent gods who spent centuries bickering, they were about to catch his hands. With his current stats, wiping them out would be a cakewalk, even if it meant massive collateral damage across the globe. A tragic loss of life, not his problem. Deep in his villain arc, he completely zoned out. Plotting absolute world domination while sitting there looking like an innocent little kid was a wild contrast. He sank into the flow of mana around him, syncing his heartbeat with his internal core to perfect his magical resonance. Right next to him, his little sister was completely oblivious to his dark scheming, just hyped for a fun family road trip. She was just thrilled to hang out. Meanwhile, Jamie was silently praying this carriage ride would end soon. He wanted 0 drama and 0 random encounters. Just a smooth trip while luck was still on their side. The route was packed with insane, jaw-dropping scenery that practically begged you to stop and stare. Way better than glancing at it while sprinting for your life. The cityscape was dazzling, a total sensory overload for kids. Especially kids who hadn't seen enough of the world to act like fancy architecture critics. Honestly, even Jamie was caught off guard. Staring out the carriage window, he soaked in the skyline of a metropolis he'd never explored. His mom dropped the lore. This place was the kingdom's ultimate flex. Regan was an absolute goldmine, handling more cash flow than anywhere else on the map. Word on the street was that Seldom only maintained its insane wealth because it siphoned off Regan's massive economy. Now it was finally time to witness the hype firsthand. The carriage ride passed in an absolute blur as they soaked in the stunning scenery outside, and before they knew it, they had arrived at the drop-off point. Jamie totally played up his act, screaming about how hyped he was to meet Count Simon. He laid it on super thick, acting like a totally obsessed fanboy whose heart was basically pounding right out of his ribcage. Naturally, his mom took that as the ultimate green light to swoop in for a massive bear hug, practically squealing. over how precious and sweet her little boy was. Once the intense affection finally cooled off, she tilted her head and asked if all this hardcore fanboying meant he wanted to be a top-tier spellcaster, just like his uncle. Trapped in a corner, our guy knew opening his mouth would be a huge mistake. He just gave a silent, eager nod to dodge the bullet, knowing from experience that talking back would only trigger a full-blown interrogation. Buying the act, his mom dove straight into the lore dump. She flexed how insanely overpowered the Count was. Dude was exactly his dad's age, yet he was already rocking the title of a 7th-class mage. That alone proved he was built different. Since his mana manifested like blazing crimson flowers, the streets knew him as the legendary Red Lotus Mage. Rumor had it that a single strike from this guy could instantly wipe out 1,000 enemies without breaking a sweat. Now, that kill count, that definitely grabbed Jamie's attention. He immediately wanted to dig deeper into the man behind the myth, trying to figure out the best strategy to interact with him. His mom was totally caught off guard by this sudden hardcore curiosity, and scrambled to keep up with his rapid-fire questions. She froze up for a second before dropping another crucial detail, mentioning his hair was literally blood red, which gave him this insanely dark and terrifying aura. But honestly, our boy literally could not care less about the flashy titles or the 7th-class ranking. That was all just background noise. The only detail living rent-free in his head was the sheer destructive firepower required to solo an entire army in one shot. Jamie needed a face-to-face chat. He was desperate to scale this mage's true potential, hoping to swipe some high-level secrets to level up his own future game plan. His previous chat with Marcus felt like a total waste of time since it wrapped up way too fast. The upcoming clash of minds with Count Simon sounded incredibly spicy. The carriage finally rolled to a stop and his mom went full helicopter parent mode, ordering them to stick to her like glue. Knowing better than to trigger another exhausting lecture, Jamie swallowed his pride and played along. He offered a quick nod of surrender. Right on cue, a slick, dark-haired guy stepped up, verifying if she was the honorable wife of Count Welton. After she gave him the green light, the attendant offered a deep bow and promised to escort the VIPs straight to their quarters. It was time to chill out post-travel and gear up for the massive event ahead. And bro, their suite was dripping in absolute wealth. Their home estate was already pretty stacked, but this was straight-up billionaire tier. Every single inch was dripping in gold and crazy intricate details, the kind of ridiculous opulence a normal person couldn't fathom in their wildest dreams. The staff member politely announced that this insane penthouse would be their base of operations for the entire festival. If they needed literally anything, their private butler was just a call away. His mom was visibly impressed, flexing about how the Count was rolling out the red carpet for them. Hooking them up with the most god-tier suite available was a major power move that she totally respected. Jamie even scored his own massive private room entirely off-limits to everyone else. The host definitely read the room perfectly, knowing a growing kid absolutely needed to escape his parents' shadow. But his overbearing mom, forever clinging to her precious baby, immediately ordered him to report back to her suite the second he finished dropping his bags. Fast forward a few minutes, and she was practically mobbed by a squad of stylists aggressively prepping her for the high society gauntlet on their schedule. The maids were totally losing their minds over how gorgeous she looked. She stared into the mirror, completely shook by her own reflection. After a legendary makeup session meant to get her gala ready, she basically leveled up her aesthetics to a jaw-dropping degree. Even Jamie was completely stunned. She was glowing with this insane youthful elegance. You'd never guess she had 2 kids running around. Catching her son staring like he had just seen a goddess, her ego absolutely skyrocketed. Jamie's hype meant the absolute world to her, making her giggle like a stoked teenager. Sure, the staff had been showering her with praise all day, but his silent awe was the only validation she cared about. She literally lunged forward, desperate to crush him in a thankful hug and totally gush over how sharp his own outfit was. But the stylist squad instantly hit the brakes on that idea, terrified she'd wreck the masterpiece they just created. She begged her glam team for just one tiny squeeze, but they straight up denied the request. One false move and that insanely expensive dress was done for. Right as she tragically accepted defeat, his little sister finally made her grand entrance, stepping out in a crazy, elegant ball gown. The kid honestly looked like absolute royalty. Looking straight out of a royal lookbook, the little sister was basically a living, breathing doll twirling around while her mom hyped up her fit. But the only validation she actually craved was her big brothers, mainly because this whole family basically worshipped the ground he walked on. A dynamic that honestly felt a bit heavy-handed sometimes. Jamie gave her a solid 10 out of 10 for the cute factor, but immediately pointed out how suffocating that dress looked. He patted her shoulder, promising they would just grit their teeth and survive this fancy nightmare together. But now, it was the young lord's time to shine. Time to throw on his own high-end drip and absolutely blind the crowd, with his visuals proving that elite genetics seriously ran in the family. Honestly, the grueling makeover session was the perfect mental distraction from the high-stakes political chess game waiting for them. Stepping into the main hall, they walked right into a massive sea of the kingdom's most elite snobby VIPs. Jamie scanned the massive room, letting memories of epic banquets from his past life flash through his mind. But even he had to admit this place was dripping in pure, unadulterated wealth. From the gold-laced architecture to the custom silk gowns, the flex was unreal. Leaning in close, he whispered to his mom, asking if the Count was always this obsessed with showing off his cash. She just smirked, confirming the guy was a total show-off, and told Jamie to brace himself for the actual meet and greet. Right on cue, a swarm of high society ladies zeroed in on Madame Welton, hitting her with the classic fake shock of how long it had been. They showered her with over-the-top compliments about her flawless fit, though to be fair, she genuinely looked like an absolute queen. Jamie watched the entire exchange with dead, unamused eyes. He knew exactly what this was, blatant networking to squeeze some clout out of his family name. Some things literally never change. Whether in his past life or right here, right now, clout chasers were always going to act fake. It gave him major flashbacks to those pathetic mortals who used to kiss up to the very same gods that ruined his life. The memories alone made his blood boil, but thankfully, his mom was an absolute pro at swatting away these social parasites. She maintained the perfect icy boundary, slicing right through the chaotic, loud energy of the mingling crowd. Just as the gossip was hitting its peak, a booming voice echoed through the massive hall, slicing through the chatter. Enter Rival Banner, one of Reagan City's top-tier administrative dogs. He projected his voice to welcome the elite crowd, and instantly, a dead silence dropped over the room as every single eye locked onto him. You had to give the guy credit, he managed to silence a room full of hyped-up self-important nobles in 2 seconds flat. Flashing a PR-approved smile, he announced the main event was kicking off and ordered everyone to hit their assigned VIP seats to dodge a stampede. But then he dropped the real bomb. He told the crowd to brace themselves because Count Simon and his inner circle were pulling up any second. He demanded a roaring applause, but before the crowd could even prep their hands, the main doors blew open, revealing a guy with blazing crimson hair. The dude's aura was just aggressively intense, making the rest of the dressed-up crowd look incredibly basic by comparison. He strolled in with this slow, absolute main character energy, drinking up the spotlight like it was his oxygen. He dragged out his entrance for maximum dramatic effect. Meanwhile, Jamie completely froze his jaw, practically hitting the marble floor. His brain instantly pulled up a file on a person he never in a million years expected to cross paths with at a stuffy rich people party. The redhead smirked, throwing out a vague comment about it being a long time no see, sending Jamie's anxiety through the roof as his worst theories were instantly validated. The reincarnated wizard was officially backed into a corner, his mind racing to calculate the least disastrous way to handle this trap. One wrong move and his family's reputation was cooked. Ignoring the tension, the crimson-haired man threw out a casual greeting, telling the crowd to party hard. He played the gracious host perfectly, but Jamie was deaf to the speech. His brain was screaming. One terrifying fact, this guy was a casual level 7 wizard. Keeping his poker face took everything Jamie had. He was staring down a monster whose power scaling completely rivaled the legendary Marcus Linmel. Heck, this dude might actually wipe the floor with that gray-haired veteran. Suddenly, a specific warning from his mom echoed in his head. She had casually dropped the title Wizard of the Red Lotus, and looking at this walking inferno, that nickname suddenly hit way too close to home. Despite the danger, Jamie was ridiculously intrigued. The ancient scheming soul inside the kid's body practically smirked, sensing a massive cheat code in this new connection. The Count casually sauntered over to Madame Welton, locking eyes and noting it had been a hot minute since their last run-in. He threw out a super backhanded compliment, claiming she looked way better than last year, a toxic mix of praise and straight-up shade. Without missing a beat, she kept her cool, coldly shutting him down and demanding he keep last year's drama out of his mouth. She then hit him with a deadly polite smile, claiming she was just so thrilled he was still breathing. The Count, sensing the ice, quickly pivoted. He pointed out the glaring absence of Count Welton, but the madam brushed it off, stating her husband was handling some sudden high-level fires and would roll in later. Business that absolutely could not wait. The redhead gave a short nod, shifting his intense gaze to Jamie, asking if this kid was the heir. It was a total no-brainer of a question, honestly, just a formality to establish dominance. But stepping up to the plate, his mom practically radiated pride as she officially introduced Jamie, who was busy staring down the Count with a lethal mix of awe and pure tactical calculation. The matriarch gently pushed her daughter forward, introducing Sarah Welton to the room before nudging both kids to pay their respects to the man of the hour, Count Simon. Dipping into a flawless bow for the ball's grand host, the siblings proudly announced their full names, making sure everyone knew exactly who the Weltons were. Simon's wife immediately swooned, gushing over how absolutely gorgeous the siblings looked. She even praised their sharp wits, clearly impressed by how smoothly these kids handled themselves around high society heavyweights without breaking a sweat. Never one to fake false modesty, Mama Welton totally owned the compliment, hyping up her kids with pure, unfiltered pride. In her eyes, her babies were absolute perfection, and she was not about to pretend otherwise just to be polite. But off to the side, the Count's eyes were locked dead onto the eldest Welton boy, his gut screaming that something about this kid was dangerously off. He kept his mouth shut though. Jamie, meanwhile, was chilling like he owned the place. Even with the host practically burning holes into his skull, the boy's magical aura was so insanely overpowered that he knew exactly how much he could push this guy's buttons. Flexing just a fraction of his power, Jamie curled his fingers into a mana-packed fist, dropping a massive silent threat that he could absolutely wreck the room if pushed. That little flex, it actually cracked Simon's stone-cold facade, pulling a sly smirk onto the previously emotionless host's face. Looking completely thrilled by the invisible standoff, the Count leaned in and casually verified if the kid went by the name Jamie. It was clearly a test, a verbal jab at the boy who just dared to check him. Not even slightly rattled, the Welton heir looked him dead in the eye and confirmed it. Locking gazes in a heavy, unspoken duel, the two magic users communicated volumes without dropping a single syllable. They forged a silent pact to hash things out later, their clashing egos sparking a massive mutual curiosity. Suitably entertained, the Count finally spun around. He strolled back to his throne-like chair, leaving the Weltons floating in a cloud of weird vibes and unanswered questions. Jamie tracked the man's retreating back, secretly hyped that the host actually matched his crazy expectations. Round 2 could not come fast enough. Next time they could drop all this annoying polite society garbage. Wrapping up the mandatory greetings, both sides exchanged standard pleasantries. The hosts flashed their practiced smiles, urging the newcomers to mingle and enjoy the lavish bash. Off in the wings, Simon's son was eyeing Jamie like a complex math problem, wrestling with a deeply unsettling vibe he just could not put his finger on. Snapping back to reality, Jamie quietly asked when his own dad was showing up, prompting his mom to whisper back. She guessed he would drop in right around sunset. Meanwhile, back at the VIP section, the host's family finally had breathing room to spill their real thoughts. The tea started spilling immediately. One of Simon's boys cornered his dad, demanding the full read on the Welton kid. But Simon totally flipped the script, questioning why a literal 10-year-old was suddenly so obsessed with their brief little standoff. Playing defense, the kid quickly reminded his dad that he was the future heir, and since Jamie was exactly his age, keeping tabs was just smart business. He claimed it was purely for networking purposes. Simon squinted at his offspring, seeing right through the painfully fake innocent angel routine. The kid was trying way too hard to play nice, especially since the streets were already whispering about his cutthroat hustle to dominate the young noble scene. He was practically running a miniature mafia among the rich kids. It was crazy obvious he was just trying to score some brownie points with the old man. Simon thought the whole power play was total garbage, but decided to entertain the kid's little ego trip anyway. Tossing a bone like he was petting a puppy, the Count dryly commended his son for having such a massive brain for his age. Thinking he had won, the boy eagerly waited for his dad to drop more lore about Jamie. Instead, Simon totally shut him down, demanding a pre-dinner cocktail. And just like that, the Welton gossip was officially dead. Luckily, the kid knew he could always manipulate his way-too-sweet mother for backup. Always wearing rose-tinted glasses when it came to her offspring, she gently begged him to play nice with Jamie, reminding him about their family's deep historical alliances. Keeping the peace was vital for the legacy, she insisted. The ginger brat immediately shifted gears, nodding along like a total saint. He swore up and down he would be the absolute best buddy to Jamie, promising his mom she could sleep easy tonight. For a split second, she beamed with absolute joy, thrilled that her little boy actually grasped the cutthroat political chess game of high society. Convinced the drama was diffused, the Countess finally let her guard down, ready to just vibe and sip some expensive champagne. She flagged down a waiter for her own drink. But the exact nanosecond his parents looked away, the kid's angelic mask completely shattered. His face twisted into a villainous sneer, shooting a mental middle finger to his mom's pathetic little peace treaty. Zero chance was he ever going to play nice with that absolute trash bag sitting across the ballroom. Jamie was strutting around with way too much unearned swagger. The ginger psycho silently vowed to make the Welton heir physically beg at his feet. It was officially his personal crusade to shatter Jamie's edgy ego illusion and expose him as a total fraud. Tripping insanely hard on his own power fantasy, he totally lost track of reality, his twisted focus snapping right back to his dad. Surely the old man would have to acknowledge his absolute genius now. The redhead was desperately craving that sweet paternal validation. If he could literally mentally break the rival family's golden boy, Count Simon would finally have no choice but to bow down and respect him. Another guy from Count Simon's bloodline caught his brother's smug expression, throwing some serious side-eye at that arrogant smirk, as pure judgment flashed in his gaze. Right then, a twisted idea sparked in his head, one he was dying to test out, so he could watch the chaos unfold and use the fallout to his absolute advantage. Once the endless dinner finally wrapped up, everyone split up to mingle, since networking is basically a survival skill for these high society snobs, to keep their VIP connections tight. Jamie's mom immediately went into Tiger Mom mode, ordering him to play nice and charm every single person in the room. Meanwhile, she strutted straight toward the heavyweight noble houses. to spill the tea on elite politics and catch up with old friends she hadn't seen in forever. But Jamie, he was absolutely not vibing with this crowd, heavily preferring to ghost everyone and chill by himself. Exhausted from faking smiles, playing this flawless air act, and craving the sweet peace and quiet he'd been manifesting all day, he slipped out the back and stumbled into a gorgeous water garden. It was the ultimate low-key spot to just crash and vibe with the scenery. Tucked away nearby sat a hidden pavilion, literally the perfect sanctuary to dodge nosy guests, and finally breathe without an audience in total silence. Looking at the layout, he realized mastering magic wasn't Count Simon's only obsession. The guy clearly had taste, yet it blew Jamie's mind trying to picture someone reaching that insane tier of power. Honestly, Jamie was secretly sweating his upcoming face-to-face with the Count, needing a rematch to truly gauge the man's terrifying stats. Suddenly, a voice snapped him right out of his thoughts. Instinct took over. Pure mana flared in his palm as he instantly pivoted for a lethal strike, convinced that nobody casual would sneak up on him here. Eyes locked and fully focused, Jamie swung his arm, ready to obliterate whoever had the guts to ambush him, fully believing he had just walked right into a trap. His spell crackled to life in milliseconds, leaving zero room for hesitation or mercy mid-swing. As the glowing light illuminated the shadows, he finally locked eyes with his target. But instead of an assassin, Jamie was staring down a terrified girl who looked absolutely traumatized, that dropping two simple words almost got her nuked. Jamie's killer instinct completely glitched. He had zero clue who this stranger was, and let's be real, the odds of this trembling kid plotting his murder were practically zero. He immediately canceled his spell, giving her a totally bewildered look, trying to process how someone so ordinary bypassed his radar and triggered his fight or flight. She let out a shaky breath, clearly not signing up to dodge fatal magic just for trying to chat with a party guest. Mental note: approach rich kids with extreme caution next time. Once the shock wore off, her fear snapped right into anger as she yelled, asking if he was literally insane for attacking random people for zero reason. Jamie fired right back, pointing out that creeping up on a mage like a horror movie villain is a massive red flag. He coldly told her she should be celebrating the fact she still had a pulse, even if threatening a lady wasn't exactly polite. Pushing the drama aside, he narrowed his eyes, way more focused on who exactly she was, and how on earth she managed to stealth drop right behind a master mage undetected. Her eyes lit up with a spark of defiance. She suddenly realized she held the cards here. She could either spill her secrets or leave him completely clueless, which sounded super tempting, after he basically almost blasted her to ash. Jamie instantly felt a surge of annoyance. Everything from her snappy attitude to her spooky ninja skills was seriously rubbing him the wrong way. Done playing games, he decided to make it crystal clear he wasn't here for the sass. Skipping the small talk, he summoned a fresh surge of raw mana, sending a massive warning sign that treating him like a joke would end incredibly badly for her. The blast slammed into the dirt just 2 inches from her boot, a hardcore visual aid, proving that if she gave a fake answer, the next shot wouldn't miss. The girl froze, completely stiff, her brain short-circuiting as she tried to figure out how to survive this, without triggering another strike, while desperately trying to keep her true identity under wraps. He casually mentioned the spell was an airball solid tier 2 magic. To a regular person, that power level was an absolute death sentence. Jamie leaned in, his voice icy, explaining that unless she had some heavy-duty defensive barriers equipped, that blast would literally shred straight through her, guaranteeing an instant game over for a fragile kid like her. She stared at him in utter disbelief, struggling to accept that this random boy was dead serious about unaliving her over a simple jump scare. Letting the terrifying threat hang heavily in the air, he hit her with the question one more time. Who was she and how exactly did she breach his blind spot? The reality check finally hit her like a truck. Flexing on a clearly unstable, overpowered mage was a terrible strategy, and keeping her mouth shut might actually get her killed. She was totally ready to spill her guts, even if she tried playing hard to get. Jamie gave her a chilling warning to start talking, fast before a magic bullet literally pierced her skull. Desperate to cool his intense vibe, she instantly blurted out her name, Ashbal. Then she dropped a massive bombshell. She wasn't just Viscount Bal's eldest daughter, she was a legit spirit summoner, laying all her cards flat on the table. A summoner is a rare breed of mage who locks down contracts with mysterious nature spirits, unlocking insane powers that leave regular wizards in the dust. You barely ever see them wandering the continent, which makes them VIP magic users practically guaranteed a Baron's title. And right now, Jamie had to wrap his head around the insane fact that this random girl was actually one of them. Packing a wind spirit explained exactly how she crept up on him like a ghost, a detail that clicked in Jamie's mind as she kept talking. He was genuinely shook. They were the exact same age, yet she was already wielding summoning magic. Normally, mages don't even start training to vibe with nature until they hit 10 years old. But honestly, looking at her crazy talent, she was clearly a born prodigy. If she kept grinding, she could legitimately sign a contract with a Spirit King. Suddenly, her loud voice snapped him right back to reality. She was practically demanding to know his identity and why he was throwing around such lethal magic. Jamie just let out a dark chuckle. The sheer audacity of this girl actually trying to interrogate him right after spilling her own life story was hilarious. It was painfully obvious she absolutely hated losing, or at least being the only one exposed. Still, she didn't back down for a second, desperately trying to drag some info out of him to level the playing field. Figuring it wouldn't hurt, he decided to drop his name, and casually flexed that he was the sole heir to the Earl of Welton. Smirking, he told Ash Bally it was a pleasure to finally meet, totally brushing past the fact that they were literally just seconds away from a lethal magical brawl. He only played nice because the Ball family were fiercely loyal vassals to the Welton estate, meaning she had zero leverage over him anyway. Meanwhile, back at the main estate, Jamie's father was currently handling some street trash. He glared at one of the bandits like he was nothing but a minor pest. Normally, he let them slide, since underground rats occasionally had their uses. But these absolute fools had the nerve to repay the Count's rare mercy by running a human trafficking ring right under his nose, a completely suicidal mistake. He usually looked like the picture of calm and collected wisdom, but cross him and the Count turned into an absolute unstoppable demon, and right now he was about to unleash hell on this syndicate. He coldly stated that only a complete lunatic with a massive death wish would ever dare pull a stunt like this in his territory. Pure, unadulterated rage radiated from the man, and he was fully prepared to violently take it out on every single scum bucket who thought they could break his absolute moral code. The terrified thugs screamed and begged for their miserable lives, but the Count was deaf to it. Their pathetic cries literally just faded into static background noise, an annoying distraction from his brutal delivery of justice. Keeping his face completely stone cold to mask his boiling fury, he gave a terrifyingly simple order. The arrogant scumbag in charge was to be publicly hung by the neck the very next morning, a permanent fix to ensure he'd never cross the line again. His elite guards immediately nodded, swearing to execute the command perfectly. Honestly, they were totally on board with the heavy-handed sentence, considering these traffickers were absolute monsters anyway. With the trash taken out, Argino instantly barked for his carriage to be prepped. He had to hit the road that exact second if he wanted to crash the noble ball and reunite with his family in time. Barely minutes later, the wheels were spinning rapidly, closing the distance to the lavish party where his wife and 2 kids were waiting. Cut back to the busted human traffickers. These dead men walking were currently being dragged straight toward the execution block, about to pay the ultimate price for their sick crimes. But high up in the shadows, a mysterious guy rocking a black cloak was intensely stalking the convoy. Keeping his face totally hidden from the world, he was absolutely seething at how horribly this mission tanked, muttering that the street gang completely blew it. He gripped some weird, ominous sphere in his palm time to roll out a deadly plan B. While all this hardcore mafia drama was going down, across the kingdom, the vibe over at the high society ball was a totally different kind of chaotic. Out in the moonlit garden, heavy aristocratic teen drama was fully brewing. The 2 of them were practically glued to the grass, locked in an incredibly awkward standoff. Their weird clash had flared up so fast nobody could even process what the actual beef was anymore. Jamie's brain was totally short-circuiting. This was literally the absolute last scenario he ever wanted to deal with. All the guy wanted was 5 minutes of peace and quiet. Losing his chill, he angrily snapped, demanding to know why she was stalking him like a total creep, instead of just letting him catch a breather. But then the girl fired back with a line that genuinely stunned the reincarnated mage. She straight up told him that her father, being his sworn vassal, meant absolutely zero when it came to the 2 of them. Rolling his eyes, Jamie just told her to drop the weird attitude and get lost because she was heavily killing his vibe and stressing him out. He was literally pivoting to walk back to the boring party hall, fully ready to tell her to stay put, when she suddenly yanked his arm. She was clearly not letting him escape that easily. And honestly, Jamie was reaching his absolute boiling point. Dealing with his suffocating mom and sister was already a massive headache, but now, some completely random girl was invading his space without a single right to be there. He honestly couldn't process why she was clinging to him like a literal parasite. Seriously, who actively latches onto a dude that literally threatened to end her life just minutes ago? Ash clocked that he was the absolute first person, her exact age, she'd bumped into around here. So naturally, she wanted to play besties, treating him like some golden networking opportunity she absolutely couldn't pass up. Jamie's brain straight up blue-screened at her words. The whole concept of friendship felt like a completely out-of-touch punchline to him, or just some ridiculous myth straight out of a corny fairy tale. It literally never crossed his mind that she was shadowing him just to play pals. A heavy, painfully awkward silence instantly crashed down between them. If she wanted a loyal minion, sure, that made logical sense. But craving a buddy, that equation just did not compute in his head. To be brutally fair though, the young mage had to admit that having friends was a massive deal for regular kids her age. That was a painfully normal detail he'd entirely wiped from his memory, considering he was basically speedrunning his second life and couldn't relate to actual childhood innocence anymore. Even with fresh tears pooling in her eyes, Jamie remained ice cold. Her emotional baggage wasn't his problem, and he definitely wasn't running a charity. Snapping with pure irritation, he flat out told her to go bother someone else. Since he wasn't taking applications for a best buddy, and tying himself down with useless emotional attachments sounded like pure dead weight. She immediately shrieked about how incredibly toxic he was, being a harsh wake-up call that she was in fact just a 10-year-old kid. And you really couldn't expect any deep logical maturity from someone still throwing tantrums. But in his eyes, any kind of bond was a straight-up hazard. Relationships were totally irrational liabilities that compromised his absolute safety and personal gain. Had he realized this brutal reality back in his first run, he wouldn't have swallowed the catastrophic fallout that completely ruined him. So he figured doing her a solid meant shattering her delusions right then and there, force-feeding her the harsh survival rules he had bought with blood and failure without wasting another second. The whole vibe had Jamie practically crawling out of his own skin. And deep down, a dark spark of fury ignited toward this girl. Her mere presence was dragging up, suffocating trauma from his past that he fought so hard to bury. The exact second he finally shook off his unwanted shadow and tasted sweet solitude, an obnoxiously loud voice echoed right behind his back, which automatically meant his internal radar was screaming danger. Standing there was a pack of bratty kids from rival aristocratic bloodlines, and trust me, they weren't looking to trade friendship bracelets like Ash Vale. They were absolutely out for blood. Jamie's eyes locked dead onto a shock of fiery crimson hair that belonged to none other than Count Simon's arrogant heir flexing at the very front like the untouchable alpha of his pathetic little squad. Instead of cowering like these punks desperately expected, Jamie stood his ground, radiating pure, unfiltered hostility. Yet masked by ice-cold calculation, he dared the kid to repeat whatever garbage name he had just called him. The lackeys instantly bristled at the blatant disrespect being thrown at their brother. To them, this level of sheer audacity was a straight-up violation. The second kid lurking in the back suddenly clocked that they were actually squaring off against the infamous Alf, a title that sent shivers down his spine, even if Jamie literally couldn't care less about some meaningless label. Trying to make sense of the madness, the duo barked out a question in perfect unison.